Hello again, friends, and you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here, wherever you happen to be on this wonderful spring day here in the year 2021. I'm your host, the great Brian Last, and of course the man who will be answering your questions, the leader of the cult of Cornette, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Here comes Peter Cottontail, hopping down the bunny trail. Hippity hop hop, hippity hop hop. Easter's on its way. It's already here. And look at what we're doing. Go ahead, this is your program, Brian.
That was it. Usually you have a lot to say. I don't know what that was.
Usually it's not Easter morning, early in the morning with the birds still twinkling outside. And we literally 36 hours ago, we were wrapping up the experience. And now we're back here. It's like one of those ridiculous Crockett double shots, Greensboro and Albuquerque, where we're back again. But this time it's your show. You're screwing this pooch. Can I say cornholing this early in the program?
I think so. That's a fun game that a lot of people play.
It's too early for sodomy yet, though.
That's not a game people play. No, you can't.
A game people, hey, there you go. That's the next product after the action figures on JimCornette.com and Cornette's Collectibles. Jim Cornette presents a game called Sodomy.
I don't know if that's a good idea, Jim. And I don't know why you're talking about this right after bringing up Easter. And, of course, we're recording this on Easter Sunday. And you went right into the gutter and dragged all of us right with you. Was Easter a big deal in the territories?
I just needed to put myself in a good mood this morning. But anyway, you were chuckling before we even got started here during your intro. I'm not allowed to have a little fun. Now, yes, Easter, sometimes it was, Brian, to answer the question that you barely got a chance to get out, trying to save this before you go any more editing.
That's right.
And there's a game called Cornhole. Were you aware of this? They have championships. It's on television.
I knew there was a game. I didn't know there was a televised version with championships. I did not know that.
No, they have cornhole championships. It's televised. It's regional thing. It's a big cornholing is really all over the country, all over the world, as a matter of fact, I guess. In some place in every continent, people are cornholing as we speak. It's a popular game. I think you throw a thing into a hole or something. I'm not sure how they play it. But anyway, you mentioned Easter in the territories. Sometimes it was and sometimes it wasn't. And I had never actually, in a Tennessee territory, it wasn't a big thing. Certainly, I guess if Louisville ever accidentally, because that was its backup night, Sunday, usually for most of the time, if they couldn't get Tuesday at the building, it might have accidentally run on Easter. And I think if Nick's regular weekly towns ended up on Easter for whatever reason, he'd put Easter Spectacular or whatever. But it wasn't like a big deal like Thanksgiving or Christmas was in most places. But I remember in Texas, and this was 5 years apart, this will illustrate that sometimes it's whether they want to see it or not. We got booked when me and the Midnight Express left Mid-South and went to World Class. We were living in Dallas, working for the Von Erichs, but we were still getting booked out on occasion to the Mid-South territory until Watts and Fritz got sideways on whatever talent trade they were going to do for a while. And it ended up, remember when they told us go to Dallas because you can come back for our big shows. Well, they ran the Superdome. We're in the Corsicana, Texas rodeo arena. But somehow on Easter Sunday of 1985, we ended up getting booked in Houston, probably because it wasn't just Bill Watts' town. It was Paul Bosch's town and his Fritz and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, Easter Sunday of 1985, Paul Bosch runs the Sam Houston Coliseum, and the main event, and I've got the program around here somewhere with the whole card, but it was a 4-team tag team match for like a alleged $20,000 prize or whatever. And this was when multiple man matches barely ever. How often did you see, and only in the Southern Territories at all, did you have a multiple man or a really multiple team match? And it was the old four corners rules where it was elimination, every team for themselves, and the last team, you won the match. And it was the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express, the Dirty White Boys, Lynn Denton and Tony Anthony, who had just got started in Mid-South and they were pushing them, and the Freebirds. It was Gordy, Hayes, and Roberts. And Michael was on the floor as the manager. So, when we saw that was booked, we're like, okay, we always got great payoffs in Houston, but wonder how, it's Easter and Texas is a real Catholic place and everything. It was like $2,000 short, the gate was, of the Midnight and Rock and Roll Scaffold match, which was the second biggest gate that they had drawn in 1984. It was like almost full at the Sam Houston Coliseum, and it was just a hot crowd. They loved it, right? And by the way, somehow we put the Rock and Roll over in the finish. I can't remember exactly, but they had to. Where were the Freebirds working? What territory were they working in spring of 1985? Because they weren't in Dallas yet, back, but they weren't.
They were finishing up in Florida, maybe?
I think that might have been because they weren't in Mid-South. The Dirty White Boys were the top heel team. Rock and Roll were still the babyface and the tag team champions, I think, or feuding with the Dirty White Boys in Mid-South. We were in Texas, and the Freebirds hadn't got back there yet, so they must have been finishing up in Florida.
When did they come back to Texas? Because they were on the Texas Stadium show.
In 1985?
Yeah.
That's probably right as we were leaving.
Well, no, you left a few months after that.
Well, that was May, but they weren't back yet, as I recall.
Because they did the WWF run in late summer 84.
Yeah.
And that didn't last very long. And then they came back to Texas, but then a little while after that, went to Florida. And then they came back to World Class after that. But I know they were on the Texas Stadium show, and they were baby faces by that point.
Yes, and that's because that's why I was there. We didn't coexist with the Freebird. They were there for shots, but we weren't full-time, the Midnight Express, the Freebird, in the territory together for an extended period of time at the same time. They came back full-time as we were leaving, but also since they were baby faces, at that time we wouldn't have been in the same locker room. But that's why I was thinking, remember, there was only fucking 14 guys on the full-time world-class roster most of the time. So they already had Gino, Chris, Gang, me and the Midnight. If they'd put the Freebirds on the heel side, they wouldn't have been able to afford any baby faces. Anyway, point is, that was a big match in Houston. And did a big gate, and of course it was Paul Bosch and it was Houston. But then you fast forward 5 years, Easter Sunday of 1990. We're in San Antonio, 250 miles down the road, right? For WCW at the Hemisphere Arena, 17,000 seat building. And the imminent event booker that actually coffee go-getter for Ed Cohen in the WWF that they had stolen from the WWF, Don Glass, to book their arena tours, had booked us at one of the coldest periods in WCW's history on Easter Sunday in the afternoon to top it all off in San Antonio, Texas, which is like 215% Catholic. And we had like 600 people in that building. It looked like a piss hole in a snowbank. And I was sitting in the locker room. I said, let me be the first one to say, does anybody have Don Glass's number? Anybody got Don Glass's home phone number? And I said, well, why? I said, because about fucking 3 a.m. in the morning tonight, I want to call him at home. And when he answers the phone, I want to say, hey, Don, are you in bed with your wife sleeping right now? And he would say, no, I'm on the phone. And I'd say, well, we ain't either, because we're in San Antonio. Fuck you. But anyway, so you see the wrestling business, the worm can turn. So Easter just was hit and miss. It depended on whether somebody made a big deal out of it or not. That's the moral to that story.
Ah, there was a moral to the story.
There was a moral there. The morals of the story are the most important thing, young Brian.
I'm a little distracted. Who is this?
Who? I don't know.
I'm going to give this guy credit. I don't know why he sent this to me, but I'm laughing at the headline because I don't know anything about this. Someone on Twitter, Andrew Monahan, just sent me this article from a British newspaper. The headline is Mars Bar's Up Arse Champ branded a cheat for using the small multi-pack one.
What now? I didn't even understand all the words that you just read there. Can you please give that to me slower and in English?
Well, they don't have them here in America anymore, but you know what a Mars bar is, of course.
I didn't know they didn't have a Mars bars. It was a fucking candy bar. I didn't know do they not make them now?
I was under the impression they don't make Mars bars domestically, only for the other countries.
I don't know. I was never a Mars bars consumer. I've just heard of them, obviously.
Well, the headline is Mars Bar's Up Arse Champ. So apparently he's the champion of sticking.
Oh, up arse, A-R-S-E.
That's right.
It's the way that the folks across the pond say ass. So the Mars bars up the arse. He's a champion of sticking Mars bars up his ass. Is what you're.
Well,
saying?
you would think, but apparently he's been branded a cheat for using the small multi-pack one.
Well, God damn it. Now, who can you trust anymore?
So I got distracted because I was like, what is this? And then I read the first paragraph. The world of competitive The world of competitive confectionery up-arsing is in turmoil. After the man who held the Mars Bars Up Bum record had his title withdrawn. So apparently the title's been vacated.
Okay, continuing on, does it give any background on this competition, where it got started, where it's perpetrated at?
Mark Anderson had kept his record of squeezing 12 of the popular household treats up into his otherwise out-of-bounds bun. Oh, the British. Up into his otherwise out-of-bounds bumhole since last summer. But now, the all-powerful International Anal Insertion Association has ripped the award back off the garden.
Wait a minute. The IAIA? The IAIA sanctions this?
That's right.
Well, then it's got to be legitimate.
The outfit's official rules and regulations committee says Mark, 41, broke all their bum fudge guidelines. Broke all their bum fudge guidelines as he failed to use standard size 51 grams Mars bars to pack up his fundament. And they're insisting his use of the smaller...
You gotta have good fundamentals.
His use of the smaller 39.4 gram bars from popular multi-packs means his record claim is now void. Now, I'm not even going to...
Now, wait a minute. Hold on here. Say, how many did he...
12.
12? And they were 39.4 grams?
Yes.
So it's 39. That's almost 500 grams he had up his ass. I bet you some Colombians would like to talk to this guy.
Without even reading any of the rest of it, there's a second...
Is there pictures?
There are pictures, and this man does look quite sad. And his wife is here, too.
His wife?
Maybe she helps. I don't know.
What record does she hold?
Well,
is it for corn on the cob or large summer squash or have a real good eggplant? Possibly a watermelon? Certainly not kumquats.
So the next section is labeled leakage. But Mark is furious that this was never pointed out to him at the time of his great effort and is demanding his title is reinstated. He told Sunday Sport, well, this is in the sports section, You have to wonder if anyone can contemplate the idea of getting 12 Mars bars up your arse. I tell you what, it takes a lot of time and effort to get them all up there, snugly fitted, without any chocolate leakage.
Yeah.
To suggest that I was somehow cheating when really I was just being thrifty by saving some cash on the multi-pack is devastating. It has literally added insult to injury because having that amount of chocolate packed inside your arse takes some doing and doesn't lend itself to comfort. Mark is now being comforted by his wife, Pat, 37.
How old is she?
Well,
how old is she?
37, but hold
37?
on, don't bury the lead. Herself, a record holder for having fitted an impressive 14 Fry's Turkish Delights upper front bottom. What the fuck is this? Oh. She said, quote, "Our Mark has done his level best to reach his greatness, and this is how those fucking snide treat him. I'm worried sick now. They might try to take my own title off me, too. All that work for nothing. It's enough to make a grown man cry, and it wouldn't surprise me if our Mark did, not just when he set his record either." So, it has nothing to do with anything, but this article just popped up my Twitter feed, so I had to let you know why I was laughing.
You know what those folks need, him and his wife? I have a feeling, I haven't even seen the pictures yet, but I have a feeling that both he and his wife need to take a visit to Manscaped.com. Don't you agree?
Probably before they compete.
Because there has to be witnesses. There has to be somebody. I mean, you can't take somebody's word for it. It's like a drug test. Somebody's going to have to be standing there counting, like at the Nathan's hot dog eating competition on the 4th of July. They've got a counter right behind them watching. So I have a feeling that neither one of these individuals spends enough time on the grooming of their nether regions, at least as much time as they spend on the insertion of various foodstuffs into their nether regions. But the folks at Manscaped could fix them up. And imagine, folks, if you're not shoving extra large eggplants up your fucking sphincter, imagine what Manscaped can make you look like. Because it's spring. Stuff is springing out everywhere. The crotchal hair, the nose and ear hair, the hair that men get in various places, sometimes on the back of your knuckles, whatever the case. The Weed Whacker, the most impressive and fantastic personal grooming product that's ever been manufactured, as we've mentioned. It's got a 9,000 RPM motor, 360-degree rotary dual-blade system, but at the same time, you ain't going to cut yourself. It's impossible. I don't know how they do it. So you can make sure that all the crops are whacked. Then you can put on the Crop Preserver anti-chafing ball deodorant and moisturizer. So the fellas sometimes stick to your leg in high humidity situations. Well, this way you make sure that you keep them swinging around in a free and level fashion. You got the Crop Reviver spray-on toner, the cologne, the refined cologne signature scent by Manscaped. Brian, I enjoy my own company when I spray on the refined cologne. So whatever you want, the greatest personal grooming products on the planet, whether you're a competitive foodstuff inserter or just a person that wants to stay fresh and feeling nice, go to manscaped.com and enter the code JCE and get 20% off and free shipping. 20% off your order and free shipping. This is a savings of, well, anywhere from a couple of bucks if you're just starting out to thousands of dollars if you're a werewolf. 20% off and free shipping with the code JCE at manscaped.com. Do a little spring cleaning around your Mr. Johnson and the twins.
All right, well, let's get some questions here on what has been a banner episode of the Drive Thru.
Should I talk to the people for just a second about that have sent me money? I forgot we didn't do that because you got started talking about shoving Mars bars up your sphincter. The action figures begin shipping this week, folks. Glory, hallelujah. So we're pre-taping ahead here. As we mentioned, it's on Easter morning, much to my dismay. But if you ordered anything besides an action figure through the end of last month when we shut down, by the time you hear this, your stuff is either in the mail or is going to be on Wednesday morning. And the action figures start shipping at the end of this week. And as we've mentioned, there's a couple of thousand of them I have to hand sign and get out. So, and it's going to be in a random order. If you think the people that ordered at 4 a.m. on the 27th are going to get sent out before the people that might have ordered at 7 a.m. on the 27th, no, we're shipping it out as quickly as the shit can be shipped. But in no particular order, because it was only 3 days for the on sale. So you didn't get too much. Nobody got a jump on anybody. But anyway, no reason to get jumpy. Everybody will eventually receive everything that's coming to Brian. You want to make sure that you get everything that's coming to you eventually, don't you?
Sure.
Well, I certainly want to make sure you get everything that's coming to you. And now, anyway, thank you guys. The store will stay closed until I dig myself out of this. Also I want to mention, thank you, Joni Aries. I forgot about this. I was going to do this on the experience, but that'll be next. I'll have already eaten it. Joni Aries from out in Washington, the state, not the city, works at a fine establishment that has a baking department, and sent me not only a celebratory cake, but a celebratory lattice apple pie. All the way from Washington, priority mail, and it's a do-it-yourself. They fixed it up for me where the cake part is in one thing, all wrapped up. The icing is in a bag, all wrapped up, so I can do it myself, and the pie was even bubble wrapped. She's been a wrestling fan for ages and ages. I won't say how long, because that would give some indication of her age, and that's impolite. But she's been a wrestling fan for a long time, photographer. Thank you, Joni, for the 200,000 YouTube subscribers celebratory cake and pie, and a gift for Stacy and treats for Harley Quinn. So we got that going for us. What else was I going to say? I was going to say, and the store is going to stay closed until I get myself out of this mess that I'm in currently. But everybody's getting their stuff.
Aren't you afraid about eating food that you get from listeners? It could be poison.
No, I know Joni.
Oh.
For heaven, she's not a poisoner.
You don't know.
No. As a matter of fact, she got off on that charge. They didn't have a thing on her. She walked.
All right, well, let's get walking real quick here on the show and talk about some of the questions that have been sent in by the Cult of Cornette.
Oh, there's questions?
The most popular one in the last several days has easily been about Chris Jericho appearing on the Broken Skull sessions on what was formerly WWE Network, I guess now Peacock, the Steve Austin interview show. This will be airing next week. Have you been following this? Have you heard about this? I have an article here about it.
I have heard of the fact that he's going to be on Steve's program. I didn't read any of the publicity about it.
Here's a article from, I hate to give them credit because they do so many just puff pieces and disservices to wrestling, but SI Wrestling, Sports Illustrated, written by Justin Barrasso. Chris Jericho is returning to the WWE Network. Jericho, one of the driving forces of All Elite Wrestling, will be the guest on Steve Austin's Broken Skull sessions following the second night of WrestleMania on Sunday. Here's a quote from Austin: "Having someone from there on a WWE show, especially the caliber of Chris Jericho, is pretty damn cool. Chris spent almost 20 years in the WWE. When you talk about best runs in the history of the business, Chris Jericho's name is going to come up." Here are a couple other quotes, how it came to be. "I was having a beer one night after my Broken Skull session interview with The Undertaker aired, and out of the blue, Chris Jericho reached out and said, 'Man, that was a great interview.' I sent him back a couple of those emojis, one of a beer mug and one of an eagle, and then he called me right then and there." I understand the beer mug. What's the eagle?
I don't know. He's throwing him a beer. The beer is flying toward him.
We got to talking. I've always respected the hell out of his career, and I'm glad they're around. It gives the guys and girls in professional wrestling more places to work. I said, I'd love to have you on the show, and he said he'd love to do it. So I checked with Vince about it. I texted Vince and said, we have this badass idea about Jericho coming on the show. Vince goes, it's cool, go ahead. But me and Vince don't always do well with phones and texts and all that. So I texted one more time. Are you sure it's okay to have Chris Jericho on the show? Vince gave me the thumbs up, and Chris came out to do the show. So obviously people want to know your thoughts about this whole thing coming together, and what does it say to you that Vince McMahon didn't even flinch, that he was perfectly fine with the biggest star, or one of the biggest stars in AEW appearing on a WWE television show?
Well, we've already established that in discussions about various things over the last few weeks on the various programs. Vince and the WWE now see this is what AEW is and is probably going to continue to be, and it is much less threatening or intimidating to the WWE now that they've seen what it is and what it's going to be than it was before it was a thing. And they just had, a billionaire is going to get in the wrestling business and he's already got television on TNT. Oh shit, we got to make sure nobody jumps there. Let's give Gallows and Anderson $750,000 a year apiece. And it's in a year and a half later, sure. The guy, he used to work for us, he went to work for them, but yeah, come on over. It's okay. Because they're not a threat. And as we mentioned, was it when we were discussing Big Show or Christian? Vince may actually now view this as a positive. Either it's a place where my guys, when I don't need them anymore, when they age out of what I think they should be doing in the ring, they can go and get a bunch of money, and in a few years, I'll bring them back and induct them in the Hall of Fame. Or, hey, yeah, let's let these guys that I don't want to use on the roster anymore, I might have ambassador spots for them or whatever the fuck, or bring them back and let somebody piss in their mouth on Legends Night. But he'll give them $1 million, and that's spending his money and tying up his resources on people that he can make announcers, producers, managers, but not actually advertised to wrestle in most cases, or certainly not regularly. So that's a good thing for the opposition to be spending money on. And the whole thing, let's go back a minute. Wouldn't you know who won the pony? As soon as Austin does something that everybody's talking about, guess who texts him? Get Jericho. He's waving his hand. What about me? It's just, it was certainly very fortuitous that Chris Jericho was able to put himself in Steve Austin's mind right at that particular point. And of course, then when Austin responded with, hey, okay, yeah, get one of these, give me the Iggy, one of these. You can't see it, but the old Rodney Dangerfield okay sign. He gave him one of these. Like, okay, pal. And then immediately he's calling him. Hey, I wonder how they got that idea for Chris Jericho to be on his show.
And also, I should add that Vince McMahon gave permission for Jericho to appear. Apparently, Tony Khan also gave permission for Chris Jericho to appear.
Well, I'm sure he did. Because besides the fact that he's, thrilled because Tony Khan is thrilled to be in this position as, the guy that got the golden ticket, little Johnny Dumbfuck, whatever his name was, Willie, whatever, got the golden ticket to, not Willie, to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. What
Charlie.
was the kid's
His
name?
Charlie.
Charlie. All right. Little Johnny Dumbfuck. Little whatever. Tony Khan is the guy that got the golden ticket. You can tell by his promos, the heel promos on Impact. You can tell by just his breathless and staccato delivery of every media interview that he does. He's the kid's got the golden ticket. He's in the locker room. He's got his own real live action figures to play with. He doesn't want to say no to Steve Austin, but if there is any mind for business in there anywhere, he also realizes, holy shit, Jericho on Steve Austin's program on the WWE network, I'll automatically get a bunch of goddamn people to watch one of my guys that I have not been able to get to watch them on our program. So it's wonderful for AEW, and it shows that let's go back 20 years to the last real war. And can you imagine the same situation where Vince McMahon would allow Stone Cold Steve Austin to do an interview or interaction or anything with anybody from Eric Bischoff's WCW?
No way.
Of course not, because that was a threat. That was competition. And now it's like, it'll get people talking about the network, the Peacock, the whatever the fuck this thing's going to be on. That's all it's like, and that's what I've been trying to explain to people, and they won't listen to me. But you start seeing it bear out. I've been saying it for months before the signs were showing. They've seen what AEW is and is going to be. They've seen the type of talent that they are signing to wrestle, and they're like, all right, it's not a big deal now. And if our ex-stars, I mean, because there was a very real chance that WCW and Eric Bischoff and the TNT television at that time, if they got one of Vince's top guys, he wasn't just a guy that was on top 15 years before. He was a guy that was on top then or very recently. And that was a threat. But, okay, in 1999, them signing, WCW signing a top WWF talent from 15 years beforehand would have been 1984, right? So I don't see Vince McMahon of 1999 having a shit fit if Adrian Adonis had still been around. If WCW signed him, they were getting the fresh guys. They were getting the guys that were still on top and could still go. And I'm not being disrespectful to Big Show, but he's 50. And I'm not being disrespectful to Christian, but he's 47. And the guys that are managers, and I guess Arn is probably wearing a number of hats. I would think, would you not? Would he not be a Cody's manager and just stand there with the Waffle House menu, but certainly he's assisting in production. One would think.
Well, I mean, he spent so many years as John Cena's personal agent. You would think someone was utilizing him for that. But when you see the matches, I don't know who that would be.
I don't know. Yeah, you come to think of it, I don't know who that would be. But anyway, I see it as a benefit for Vince McMahon that Tony Khan signs as many guys of his as he doesn't want on his current active roster as possible. And I think so does Vince. And if he lets them go and wishes them well, then they're going to come back for the Hall of Fame, as I mentioned here on the program a week or two ago. And in the meantime, he's tying up this guy's money, at some point, no money is unlimited, but he's tying up this guy's money on people that he can only advertise in the corner or on the microphone or whatever. And they ain't doing this cheap. The Sting. How many cinematic masterpieces, as we mentioned when he got there, can they have? And when is it that you're just paying a guy a large sum of money to walk to the ring mute in a leather outfit that he looked good in 20 years ago and carrying a bat that he never uses?
When do you think things changed from the WWE perspective? Because not too long ago, they were trying to lock everyone down to 5-year deals. I mean, the Gallows and Anderson offers, or contracts that they actually signed, were ridiculous. I mean, there was no way those guys are worth that kind of money. No way whatsoever. And then everyone else, I mean, they tried to lock down FTR. I mean, everyone they tried to lock down. And now they're allowing arguably the biggest star to a mainstream wrestling audience from that company onto their air. Do you think there was a moment or a specific thing that made them go, maybe we don't have to worry about these guys at all?
Well, I don't know that there was one specific, they went from go to woe. The pandemic happened about the time that the program had been on the air for about 6 months. When did they have the management shakeup in the WWE, where Vince got up on the wrong side of the bed and fired the 2 people running it and sent everybody into turmoil? When was that? And now they've got Nick Khan.
Probably around a year ago, give or take. I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head.
I think all of when new people come in, they're going to evaluate everything, and they would certainly evaluate the decisions that were made 6 months previously based on the concept of a new rival promotion, with how the new rival promotion is actually performed and what it looks like and what they've done. And they may be, well, you can't be impressed if you're the people running the WWE. You're not impressed. You're probably pissed off, dismayed, slightly concerned, not impressed that they were able to get a new wrestling promotion on national television that easily, because they realize that Tony Khan and his family have already been in these people's social circles and professional sports leagues with television contracts. Nobody else, well, has it ever happened that anybody, since Eddie Einhorn, who pretty easily got a fairly heavy syndicated network in the 70s, has anybody from another professional sports league franchise gotten in wrestling in modern memory?
Not that I recall. I mean,
okay, there you go.
Yeah, I can't think of a specific.
So the point is, yes, when they heard Tony Khan, the son of Khan, Jacksonville Jaguars, owns Wembley Stadium, all this stuff, they're offering money to wrestlers and this and that and that. Yes, the concept of that was very concerning to the WWE. And they started making moves to lock everybody up and get the program NXT on Wednesday nights, give them a stumbling block, and do the things that they started to do. And then when they have the leadership change, these other people have been on the air for 6 months or whatever. We've seen what they're doing. The pandemic hits. Everything is being rethought. And they back up on throwing money around to guys. And was that not when they fucked Gallows and Anderson? And now it's been a year and a half, and they're not going anywhere except making the moves that we've talked about. And so now the new administration and the new thought is probably they're going to do this for a while, and it's going to be the same thing, and we don't have nothing to worry about on the global scheme of things. I mean, point out where that I am misinterpreting these things.
I think you're correct, but let's get another question on the topic of AEW here. Another one that a lot of people have sent in. I'm going to pull up an article about this. Have you been following the story about TNT apparently being upset with AEW?
Oh, yeah, because they surprise debuts.
Well, here's the quote. Apparently it came up on Chris Jericho's show. One of the emails said it's called Bloat is Jericho. But he was talking to Christian Cage, one of these AEW surprises. And the quote is from Jericho, "I know when Sting was a surprise, and the network was like, don't do that again. That's why Paul White was announced on social media, because TNT said, we don't want surprises. We want to take advantage of the rating. So I think we had a big surprise, Then we had a big announcement, and we used that big announcement to announce the next big surprise. So,
oh boy,
a lot of questions have come in about this, Jim. What are your thoughts about the idea that, you know, we've talked a lot about how they blew it with the Big Show and other surprises and announcements. What are your thoughts about the fact that TNT is getting involved and telling them not to do this?
Well, at some point, some adult has to walk into the room, don't they? Or elsewise, the kids are just going to trash everything. Vince McMahon used to call it kayfabing ourselves. When we would try to make something a surprise that didn't actually need to be a surprise. And before anybody goes, oh, Cornette hates ice cream. Cornette hates surprises. No, there can be surprises. The concept of surprises, surprise debuts, surprise returns, surprise whatever the fuck, in wrestling is not, the concept of it is not bad. But it also, it's another one of the things that can be overdone. I've told the story. I'll tell it briefly just to give context to this. The time that I appeared for ECW, the instigation of it was Chris Candido calling me on the phone and said, well, you know, I'm helping Paul with the booking and we're stuck for a surprise. I said, what do you mean? We don't have a surprise for it. I said, well, I don't understand, Chris. He said, well, every ECW show at the ECW arena has a surprise, and we don't have a surprise for this show. I said, Chris, the definition of a surprise is a shocking, unexpected event. If they're expecting a surprise, you've gone past the point where it's a surprise. When Vince would say kayfabing ourselves, when we had access to a major name and had the idea to make it a surprise, but he said, no, we're kayfabing ourselves. Why are we wasting this? We can tell people and more people will watch this show. But in some cases, especially in the days of the weekly territories where you needed to keep things moving, if somebody ran in at the end of a house show match, boom, 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 oh my God, he's here, boom, 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 and then that affects your match the following week, or you make the match in front of the people or whatever. It was a surprise when Paulie Dangerously and the original Midnight Express attacked me and the Midnight Express on TBS, because to be honest, if they had said next week on the program, Paulie Dangerously and the original Midnight Express will be here to wrestle, then not only would it not have been a very big deal, because at the time, the whole idea was the personal interaction between all of us and not that they were necessarily big names in wrestling at that point. I think you'll agree. Secondly, it would have tipped people off. They were going to do an angle, and the shock was they don't work here. They're from another company. They shouldn't be here. They're in the AWA. People didn't know they'd left. So that kind of surprise works. But when you have a name of the level of the iconic nature of a Sting or a Big Show, unless they're it's guys that are going to come in and be an active part of the roster and you need them in some physical angle or whatever, why wouldn't you advertise things like that? And it could have been, if they just tweaked it a little bit, it could have been fucking advertised. They kayfabed themselves. It depends on the level of star that you've got. But a lot of times people are hell-bent on making these shocking surprises to pop the people that are already there in the building or already there watching the show, when there's something that you could have told them, a way you could have done it, where 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, you've built anticipation to see this person, and then you just surprise the people watching with what you do with them. You've kayfabed yourself. Do you want to go to a movie featuring, little Johnny Dimwit and Willy Wonka Jr., and then at the end of it, the big climactic scene, you find out that the goddamn Rock is in the movie, and they never advertised it?
Well, sometimes a surprise is important. Sometimes a surprise does work. I'll give you one that I remember from the Attitude Era, when X-Pac showed up back on Raw, that was a surprise to me, and I thought it was handled pretty well.
But that's what that's the point I'm making is it was X-Pac. It wasn't Hulk Hogan. It wasn't,
either with these AEW surprises. It was a 50-year-old Big Show, not Hulk Hogan.
But just considering the name of recognition or the level of recognition for the name in people's heads, at that point in time, X-Pac wasn't on the level. And then if you're jumping companies, yes, you've got a surprise, blah, blah, blah. But then advertise it on the fucking program. If it's X-Pac hit the ring and did a violent physical angle, as I recall, did he not? Of some description?
No. Triple
H
did they do? And DX were in the ring. It was after WrestleMania where Shawn left. And they announced that, when you need to, refill the ranks, you turn to your family, you turn to the clique. The music hit. He came out on the stage.
Oh, that's right.
People popped.
Okay, would it have affected the amount of viewers of that particular production if they'd have said X-Pac will be here also, in addition to everything else?
I don't think it affected the viewers of that show one way or the other, but it created a moment. That's really
what I'm saying. If they'd have told them about it, would it have increased the viewership? Probably not, because it was, it was already there. But if you've got that's why I'm saying, if you've got a name that you can tell people, hey, he's going to be on the program, and people will watch just because of that name, that's when you're kayfabing yourself, or buy it just because of that name. You're kayfabing yourself if you don't advertise that in a lot of cases. I can see where I can understand the words that are coming out of TNT's mouth.
If TNT is getting involved on things like this, where they say, we don't want any more surprises like the debut of Sting.
Right.
We don't want any more surprises, period. At what point do you worry about them getting more involved if the ratings don't improve, if the ratings continue to go down, and I expect them to be bumped up without the NXT competition? Do you start worrying about them jumping in and, like USA Network, wanting to write your angles, wanting you to script the show so they can approve it beforehand?
Well,
at what point do you worry about TNT's involvement?
It's Turner. There's precedent. Remember everything from the memo about no gratuitous violence on the program with no gratuitous violence, or the program about gratuitous violence. The constant interaction that they would send to Herd that he would take seriously about, hey, can we do tie-ins with our movie characters? One-legged wrestler and make him Long John Silver. It's Turner. They did all this 30 fucking years ago. They're going to start, and now they're definitely going to start doing it again, because I think by now they have realized that there is no adult in charge of this. Can you imagine being in a meeting with Tony Khan about the national television program that the time slot you've given him and you're paying for, and he's in there hippity hopping talking like, there was a fan from New York in the old days, in the 70s days of pen pals, named Kenny Levitt.
Yeah.
And we used to, do you remember Kenny Levitt?
Yeah, Paul Frank. Yeah, I know all
We
that
used to
crew,
call
yeah.
Kenny hippity hop, because he was just, and then they're going to do this and that angle and this angle and that angle. And then he was just, and that's Tony Khan. Somebody at that television network has had to figure out by this point that they know he has no background. He's never done this before. And I bet you that they're not hiding that. If it was me and I was one of the EVPs of AEW, I'd be making sure that TNT thought that it was all these veterans that were creating this program, like the Jim Rosses and the Jake Snakes and the Arn Andersons, and look at all the experience we have, because do they actually know that Tony Khan, who has never done this before in his life ever, professionally, before buying his own company, is writing the television? If they do, they've got to be concerned, especially when their ratings have matriculated since the start, from year over year and now season over season.
Can you imagine TNT having a meeting with them, and it's Tony Khan looking the way he does and talking the way he does, And Cody in a suit, but with that stupid
with the neck tattoo.
Yeah.
The TV networks, this is not rock and roll in the fucking 70s and 80s. The TV networks like stability, and they like the people that are doing their programs to have some background and experience in it. And unless they just think, it's fucking wrestling. It's like one of these game shows where they bounce off inflatable shit. Anybody can do this shit, which is very possible that they think that. But
I promise you those shows have showrunners that are probably a little more professional, or at least look more professional than AEW.
When USA deals with the WWE, over the years, they've dealt with Vince McMahon. They've dealt with Stephanie. They've dealt with the major entertainment, business bigwigs that run the publicly traded company. They've probably dealt with Triple H, who cuts a striking figure. If you think professional wrestling, if you don't know anything about professional wrestling, a guy that looks like Triple H looks like he knows a lot about professional wrestling. And he's got the background to fucking back it up. So when those people, you're talking to those people, okay, these are hundreds of millions of dollars in television times and rights fees and things we're talking about. I want to be talking to people that look and act like that. And like you said, do I want to go sit down with Tony Khan, Cody, and the Young Bucks? And don't even get me started on Twinkle Toes coming into a goddamn media. He'll pitch them a fucking hour variety show featuring Japanese play wrestlers emoting the best of Shakespeare. So I know he got it on because he travels in those. And then also the guy that greenlit AEW, what was his name? Kevin, help me. Riley. He's gone, right?
He's gone.
He
was their angel.
He's in the archives, Vapor.
So he's the one who gave them the deal. He's the one who renewed them too.
A distant memory in television now. It's been 6 months, right? So now you got somebody new having dealings with it. They better put Jim Ross in charge of their television, or their television network dealings is all I've got to say, because the fucking TNT people sooner or later are going to wake up and realize that they've stumbled onto wrestling's version of Romper Room. And there's no adult in the fucking class.
Well, Jim, TNT doesn't like surprises, and I think most people out there, most members of the Cult of Cornette, don't like surprises when it comes to their credit score.
That's exactly right. And I had some shocking information sprung on me here not long ago. And I was about to talk to you about this. But Brian, did you know that the average American has 97 points that they can add to their credit score, but they got no idea how to get them?
I had no idea about that, no.
Not only do I have no idea about that, I don't know what my credit score is, or I didn't know you could change it. I had no idea that you had control over any of these things. But with Scoremaster, apparently you do. It's a new credit science that boosts your credit score. So apparently, the average Scoremaster user raises their credit score 61 points in 20 days or less. If you got a car loan, and I didn't know it because I can't do math. That's my weakness. If your credit score was high 500s, mid 600s when you bought a new car and got a car loan, if you'd gone to Scoremaster first and raised your score just the average 61 points, you could have saved $9,000 on your car loan. But a home loan, if you'd gone to Scoremaster and got the average 61 points, you could have saved $100,000 over the life of the loan. I did not know that we had the power to take this in our hands and do something about this. I thought that this was just something that was like our fucking secret CIA file or whatever. But anyway, Scoremaster puts you in control of your finances, not the banks. And you can enroll in minutes, which I just found out about. I'm going to see what the fuck's going on with this deal, because I had no idea. You go to Scoremaster.com/JCE, Scoremaster.com/JCE, and you can enroll in minutes and see how many points that Scoremaster can add to your credit score. Somebody's been jacking us around. We didn't know about this.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I think I got to check this out.
Even you.
Even me, 61 points. Anyone could use 61 points.
The Wolf of Wall Street that you are. Actually, you're more like the knucklehead from New Jersey, but nevertheless, hey,
I'm from Long Island. I'm not from New Jersey. I live in New Jersey.
The loser from Long Island. Then.
Hey, watch it.
Hey.
From the same hometown as Rick Rubin. You better watch it, buddy.
Hey. All right, it's your show.
It is my show, and I don't know how we're going to transition, but we will try right now with our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jeremy in Minneapolis. Stephanie McMahon gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal on March 30th entitled, "Super Serve Your Fans to Drive Participation." There's a link to the article here. Of the several takeaways from the interview, the most notable is how the WWE, quote, have close to 60 data scientists working at WWE, have close to 60 data scientists working at WWE, constantly analyzing our data and synthesizing it to determine which wrestlers and storylines receive a push.
Data? Wait a minute. How do you synthesize? Isn't that synthesize means make it artificially, right?
I think they mean correlate the data.
They're making their own artificial data. No, hold on one. Just put your brakes on there. Pump the brakes there 1 second there, fella. The American Heritage Dictionary 3rd edition. We've gone past spat. Spinal column. By the way, Stacy's surgery is tomorrow as we record this, but it will be yesterday as it's heard, and I thank everybody for the well wishes that they have sent. And there's somebody calling in the background right now to say good luck. But anyway, synthesizer, synthetic of or produced by synthesis. Where did I miss?
This is synthesizing.
Synthesize, the combining of separate elements or substances to form a coherent whole. Formation of a compound from simpler compounds or elements. My whole, the complex whole so formed. Very synthetic, of or produced by synthesis, not natural or genuine, artificial. A synthetic chemical compound. So they're making up their own goddamn information. Go ahead.
These data scientists might have over $3 million in business marketing education, but not one damn nickel's worth of wrestling knowledge. How can people this smart be this stupid? Which data scientist watched The Fiend wrestle a 0-star match and decided, we need another one?
I thought you were still quoting Stephanie McMahon.
Oh, no. How do you think the boys in the locker room feel about seeing their paychecks being lower and their friends being fired to pay for 60 data scientists? How many data scientists does it take to see continually decreasing ratings to realize that fans want real wrestling back? And that's
how many data scientists does it take to screw up data?
60.
Have you ever heard that?
I've never heard that. I'm gonna click this link just to make sure it wasn't an early April Fool's joke. No, here it is. Wall Street Journal. I have an online subscrition so I can access this article.
I'm not saying she didn't say it. I'm just saying it's bullshit. When I worked there were the sum total of 0 data scientists. I know that was quite a while back. But does NASA have 60 data scientists? Is this some hyperbole on her part? Did they hire Howie from the mailroom guy? Did he go through a night class and now they've hired him to be a data scientist?
Okay, hold on. I found the part of this
actually there was
interview.
A guy from the mailroom named Howie, by the way.
I know that.
He was one of those fellas.
Here's the part of the interview. Let me read the entire answer. First of all, everything I'm looking at here, it reads like just complete soulless corporate speak. But this specific answer, the question, I love that notion. It's the whole idea behind the participation trend, creating a two-way conversation with customers and making them an integral part of the brand. What role do data and analytics play in helping you do this? Stephanie's response, they play a huge role. We currently have close to 60 data scientists working at WWE, constantly analyzing our data and synthesizing it. The team can, for example, track the impact a performer or storyline has on viewership and social media activity and tie increases in engagement to content that was airing at specific times during one of our TV programs. Merchandise sales are also a key indicator of how popular our stars are and whether they're resonating. There's a whole cosplay side to our business.
Boy, you ain't shitting there, Stephanie.
Where people want to dress the part of their favorite performer.
Yeah, so sometimes they want to be their favorite performer. Sometimes they are their favorite performer.
So merchandise sales are an important metric. WWE Network, our streaming content platform, also provides data points that are helpful. Like many brands, we're getting great at data collection. Where we can improve is in the analysis piece, determining which data is most meaningful and pulling out themes to apply across business.
What the fuck did she just say?
It's, did
any part of that say, well, our data tells us that our shit looks fake and that nobody cares about anybody on the show because they all act like idiots?
Here's another question. WWE's content strategy plays a key role in driving fan engagement. How do you keep content and storylines fresh? How do you gauge what's resonating? The answer from Stephanie? The audience has a tremendous impact on what we do. It's one of the advantages of being live. We listen to the live audience and gather feedback through digital and social media to determine which storylines and performers are resonating and why. We're constantly looking at data across our content distribution ecosystem, which includes linear TV for our weekly TV shows and reality programming, our streaming WWE network, and our digital and social channels. We have separate teams developing the content for those various platforms, and they're all telling stories and amplifying them in the most effective way for each channel. Even within social media, our content can't be one size fits all. What did she say?
I don't know. You can't tell what the product is from the way she speaks. Are they selling Van Camp's pork and beans? Well, maybe some fucking canned sweet corn. That right there is what happened to wrestling. People got involved that went to business school and learned a lot of them big words, Jethro. But they have no idea of how to apply them to actually what the fuck they're supposed to be doing. Because it's wrestling and they don't get it. And I know, and people are going to be, oh, Stephanie grew up around. I've said this before. If you think Stephanie grew up around the wrestling business, you're out of your fucking mind. And if you pump gas at a fucking Exxon station, when the chairman of Exxon pulls up with his daughter in the car, do you bother to share with her all the fucking ways that her father's fucking up that company from your working man standpoint? Or do you say, boy, your daddy runs a hell of an oil company?
Well, here's another quote here asking about how COVID-19 affected WWE's interaction with fans. After a few months of shows in the Performance Center, we decided to invest in our production capabilities and launched the WWE Thunderdome, a virtual event set. It allows us to bring in, virtually, nearly 1,000 fans for live productions, and they become part of the show. It's set up in the round, like an arena, and fans appear on video boards. We mix in audio and have been able to experiment with lasers, pyrotechnics, drone cameras,
and birds flying out of Matt Riddle's ass,
and augmented reality in ways we've never been able to before. It was imperative for us to bring the spectacle back to WWE, and that's what we did. I was just looking to see if there was any mention of Andre the Giant being her friend when she was a kid, because she mentions that every time I see her.
They were very close.
Andre was my friend. Yeah, the same way the guys who worked in my family's factory were my friends. Andre was her friend.
Well, and I bet next week on Young Rock, Stephanie will be sitting in the living room when Andre and JYD and the Iron Sheik are hanging around. Little Rock will be hanging out with little Stephanie.
She'll be booking the Battle Royal, yeah.
I mean, it's all, in all seriousness, without just trying to browbeat them, it's caca, it's garbage, it's big business, there's no passion, there's no emotion. Wrestling, at the root of it, is about stirring up people's emotions to watch somebody fight. And if the heel offends them and does things in bad taste, that's even a plus. And if the babyface triumphs overall at the end, then everybody got their money's worth. And they have wrung and pasteurized and homogenized all the spontaneity and the personality out of it and the legitimacy and the realism, the aura of violence. It's marketed and packaged and cleaned up and polished off. And they do have fans that like what they do because it's been long enough now and these people are young enough or they, whatever, that they don't care, that they either haven't seen how it was supposed to be done or they just like what they're doing here. As we know, some people in Germany like to have their balls nailed to a step stool. So they interact with those people and get their information and sell them more shit. And it's the same thing as we've been talking about here for the past few years we've been doing this podcast. Wrestling has devolved to the point where fewer people watch it than ever before, but those people spend more money per head. And so these massive companies like the WWE are trying to figure out a way to squeeze every last dollar out of the remaining people that they haven't run off by making this whole business and whole enterprise look like a bunch of fake, stupid shit. And then there's us listening to this program and doing this program that have given up on trying to save the shit and now just kind of want to make fun of it, and because to have something to do since we all remember how good it used to be before they started fucking with it.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Tom Cedric. My name is Tom Cedric.
Well, now that we've got that established, I think we can move on.
My name is Tom Cedric, and I was a maintenance executive, yes, a real thing, at the American Airlines Arena from 2004 to 2010. In April of 2008, WWE did a taping of ECW and SmackDown in Miami. In preparation of Vince's arrival, the maintenance crew was told to eradicate all mirrors from his office. When we asked why, we were told Vince hadn't been a huge fan of mirrors since 2006. Very specific and odd date. Then they warned us that we needed to keep a roped-off space in the parking garage for him because he has a superstition that when two or more cars are in close proximity to one another, they can communicate.
What?
Since I'm still, to this day, not sure if it was a rib, can you please give us any info about these weird phobias?
No. No. I mean, all I can tell you is Vince's office in any arena that they are in, that's one of the prime locations that they not rope off, but they pick out first is where Vince's office is going to be, because in the major arenas, there are a labyrinth of offices and private dressing rooms and locker rooms or rooms with a mirror and lights and a adjoining bathroom that talent can be in privately because of all the concerts and the, pro sports and the things and television productions that these major arenas do. In the smaller buildings, I've mentioned before in the early days of Raw, when we would go to some real fucking doozies, then it was a little harder to find a good place, but wherever they would always get a room that was big enough for Vince and or if several people to have a meeting in, for Vince to have all of his stuff, have his books, and that's where That's the inner sanctum where you go and talk to Vince, or you're summoned to talk to Vince or whatever. You stand out. If you're the boys, you stand out in a line outside when he's receiving. We've all heard those stories. It needs to be somewhere near Gorilla, so it's not like all the way hell and gone from the, it needs to be convenient for him. But I never once heard of a mirror needing to be removed or saw a mirror removed from any of the rooms that he ever used as an office. I have ridden with Vince, and I've driven Vince in cars, and we always got preferential parking because he's fucking Vince McMahon, and he's either renting the building or owning the company, or as mentioned, he had some kind of goddamn gimmick Hertz card that I've never heard of, and I don't even know was an actual publicly acknowledged thing where he could rent a car from Hertz and just leave it sitting anywhere. Outside baggage claim at the airport, at a fucking hotel, downtown at the parking lot, and they would come and get it. So he always had preferential parking of some description, but he never once told me, or did I observe him parking away from other cars to prevent them from communicating with each other?
The exact line here is, he has a superstition that when two or more cars are in close proximity to one another, they can communicate.
He's got more than two cars in his fucking garage.
Apparently they talk to each other.
At the mansion in Greenwich, it's either a 3 or 4 car garage. I can't remember which, but it's in a bricked in beautiful brickwork compound where you drive into it looks like a goddamn, funeral home of some description. It's so stately. And all of his cars are there in the garage, and I never observed any of them having a conversation with each other. There was the one time he is short-tempered. He's by himself one time. He told us this story, me and Bruce. He's by himself one time. He gets in his he had like some kind of, I'm not good with vehicles, but not an SUV because they didn't have them 25 years ago or whatever, but one of those, not a Jeep, not like just a sloppy little shitty, but one of those Jeep-like vehicles that cost money. And he fucking hits he gets in it, he's going to go down to the little store down the street and get him some lunch or whatever, the turkey sandwich with light mustard. And he hits his garage door opener thing and starts his car and pops it into fucking reverse without looking and steps on the gas and assumes the door is open, but the garage door opener thing, either he didn't hit it right or it didn't fucking connect, and he backed into his garage door. Boom. And then he looked up and he saw it. He got mad. He pulled up and put it in reverse and backed up again, back through the motherfucker. And went to the store and got fucking lunch and then came back and called somebody and had a new garage door put on. How did we get there?
Vince is afraid of mirrors and he thinks cars talk to each other.
No, it had to be some jolly jokers on his staff telling this poor event or arena guy, oh yeah, and the brown M&Ms and don't do this or that. I've never heard anything like that.
I want to believe it.
I would like to believe,
I really want to believe it.
Something happened to Vince in the fucking 5 or 6 years that, I was not around him on a regular basis that caused him to be afraid of mirrors. Come to think of it, it's funny thing, he does have a lot of mirrors in his house, but every time I'd be standing there talking to him, I wouldn't see him in the mirror.
Ah. See, you're focusing on the mirrors. I think the funnier thing is that cars are communicating with one another. And you can't let his car communicate or be near these communicating cars.
But here's the thing. Did they make this guy legitimately take them? Because I can't remember the specific layout of the American Airlines Arena in Miami, but it's a major NBA arena. I have been in a bunch of them and in these various office rooms and locker rooms, and these mirrors are mounted to the walls. They're part of framework or a part of the design. Did this poor guy have to come in and get some kind of maintenance guy to come in and physically remove these giant mirrors that are fixed onto the wall and in these dressing facilities and bathrooms just because somebody was yanking his chain about Vince's picadillos? Does he say, did he do it?
I think he said they did it.
Oh my God. And that's something, the building would.
The other funny part is thinking Vince is like, why aren't there any mirrors in here? Where are the mirrors?
But no, I know that's the thing, is that's because goddamn Vince is so, the one picadillo he does have, by God, is that he is fastidious about his appearance. I can't believe it. What would he be saying if he's in a room with no fucking mirrors? Was the staff ribbing Vince that he couldn't fucking, I mean, he shaves in the car in the back seat with his electric razor without looking in the mirror. He just does that as a thing like other people play with change, or like his dad played with quarters or whatever. He shaves with the electric razor, but he ties his tie, he sprays his hair. He, apparently does his makeup, or has it done these days. He needs, and they billed them for that. That would have been on the settlement statement from the arena, taking out mirrors, reinstalling mirrors after you leave. Well, I'm at a loss.
Well, Jim, let's stay on the topic of Vince or Vince-related things for our next question here. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Neil. Recently, Bruce Pritchard credited Vince McMahon, you, Jim Cornette, and himself for hashing out the Mankind character from attire to storyline and vignettes. Do you have any stories about signing Mick Foley, creating the character, and Vince's insistence that Mick wear a mask?
Well, yes, he's correct. Bruce is not exaggerating for once. We did flesh that out, but that was after he was signed. And a lot of other people basically everybody but Vince McMahon wanted Vince McMahon to sign Mick Foley. JR, myself, I'm sure Pat was involved, Bruce. Everybody that knew or knew of Mick was, a proponent of his. And Vince thought he looked, what do they say, not cosmetically pleasing. And Vince came up with the idea, and Mick has talked about this in his books, for the masked gimmick. And Vince, as you would imagine, when he had the debut meeting with the talent, where he's literally seeing these guys for the first time. He's probably never even seen a tape of him wrestling. He walks in the office because he'd call him, "Hey, Michael. Hey, Mike." Which nobody since he was like 7 had called Mick Foley Mike or Michael. But he fixated on the ear thing. And so Vince's idea was that he would be a masked weirdo called Mason the Mutilator. And so that's where we were when Bruce and I got involved. Is Vince the deal had already been made to sign him. Vince had the meeting with him and gleaned all of his personal traits so he could come up with this brilliant gimmick. And we sit down and they're showing me this stuff where it's kind of looks like the early Mankind stuff, but Mason the Mutilator. I'm like, what's the matter with Cactus Jack? And then Bruce would roll his eyes. Come on, Corny. It's not good. Everybody in the world knows him. All the wrestling fans love Cactus Jack. And no, Corny. Okay. So then Mick obviously, did not want to be Mason the Mutilator. And I think it was Mick, and I've read the book. He probably recounts it, but Mick finally got to Vince. And Mick is a very loquacious and persuasive person, and trying to do what Vince wanted to do and at the same time have it not suck. I think, Mick sort of steered him toward Mankind, and then see, Vince loves metaphors for shit, right? The deeper meaning that nobody's ever going to see but him. And if you tell him it's got a deeper meaning and he sees it, then you can get by with just doing a good gimmick. But now Mick, Mankind is tormented, and he's been made that way, and he feels that he's ugly and disfigured by all of mankind, and there's plays on the way. So that's how we got away from Mason the Mutilator. Can you imagine? Can you fucking imagine how rotten that would have been? But anyway.
The Mutilator as a name itself, I'm not saying from Mick Foley, but the Mutilator maybe there's something you could do with that, but attaching Mason to it.
Yeah. Mason the Mutilator. I mean, but be thankful it wasn't just the Mutilator with a mask on. But anyway, then once that I was able to start talking to Cactus and see what he was thinking, and they built the basement set for him in his dungeon or whatever, where he was, going to do those initial promos. I said, you got to have a rat if you're in a fucking stone dungeon cell. Here, I'll bring George. And he loved that. And, so then we were able to, and the stuff that we did with him, in my mind, anything I pitched and whatever would have been the same thing Cactus Jack would have done. He's just a different person, but it fit Cactus, who I still to this day when I see him, I call him Cactus. So we started doing shit with him that, that he would do, whether he was Mankind or whether he was Cactus Jack. And he was able to, he's one of those guys that was smart enough and cared enough and had enough promo ability and command of the English language that he took what could have been very questionable and just as silly as TL Hopper and made himself, and made that gimmick. And then of course, once that Mankind was over, because the guy was going to be over regardless, but once he was over, then they loved the fact he used to be Cactus Jack. And then all of a sudden, let's bring Cactus Jack back, and Dude Love, let's throw him in there too. He could have been, fucking the guy shoving the Mars bars up his ass. By that point, he was so over, they would let him do it. But they just couldn't let him be himself to begin with.
What do you remember about Dude Love popping up?
God damn it. You know what? I'm trying to remember exactly what the instigation was, and I can't now, even though I was part of it, but I don't have a photographic memory for everything. But the whole Dude Love thing was, and obviously this was after he was already a babyface. Mankind, the first year of Mankind where he was a heel, even though people liked him, he was doing all these things to The Undertaker and blah, blah, blah. He couldn't have just switched right into Dude Love. He had to go through, and his personality came out, and they did things with him, and people started getting behind him. But anyway, as far as actual Dude Love came from the promos that he had done on a video camera in the mid-'80s before he got into wrestling, the same time when he dropped the elbow off the roof of the house and, doomed the wrestling business forevermore. That was his gimmick that he'd come up with it for himself. But then when Russo was somebody that wanted to do it, because, for him, it was normal for people to have multiple personalities. He never figured out how to have just even the one himself. But then Cactus came to me and was like, Corny, here's a problem. Dude Love did promos, and Dude Love, I think, did the elbow off the roof of the house, but Dude Love had never actually had a match. And there was really it was just him playing when he was a kid. He said, now, how am I going to be fucking Dude Love who is Dude Love? So we got to thinking, and I mean, he got to thinking, but I was feeding him some stuff. I said, is Dude Love, he's obviously a fucking mercy kind of guy because it's Dude Love, and he's going from the original couple of promos that Cactus had done that we used in packages. I said, this was New York. This was the late 70s, the early 80s, where you channeling a little handsome Jimmy Valiant. Mercy. The tie-dye stuff. Can it be a little superstar Billy Grahamish, but as a hippie, not as a bodybuilder, but look at, you just steal shit, research shit from all those flamboyant guys from the territories that you actually, whether you knew it or not, patterned Dude Love after. Dude Love, handsome Jimmy Valiant, superstar Billy Graham, Mike the Hippie Boyette. I mean, and then I thought of some handsome Jimmy lines and some stuff that that era 70s hippie kind of wrestler would say, mercy, Dude Love is like cheap toilet paper. He don't take crap off of nobody. And just, it was to be fun. And I'll never forget Vince. Do you remember when they brought him out? Nobody knew it was going to be Dude Love, and you saw Boots walking. And this was back before every shot on every wrestling program was somebody's boots walking, because this is the reason why now there's so many. You saw the boots, you didn't know who it was, and there was a fucking kind of a little beat in the background, a little drum beat, like that, right? Vince loved that. Vince came up with it. Vince, we see his boots, and they've got a click track in the back, and we don't know who it is. That's good shit, but he didn't actually say that's good shit, pal. He just, that's the way he wanted to introduce him. And then, Dude Love started doing Dude Love and the strut and the old wrestling, hippie kind of gimmick bullshit, right? But then I've said before, Cactus came to me at one point. He felt bad about being Dude Love because Dude Love's whole thing, but he didn't jump off the roof like Cactus Jack or rip people apart like Mankind. It was all work and strutting and promo and gimmick. And he said, I'm having bad matches. I said, people are loving them. But he was upset that he wasn't taking the bumps and working as hard physically and doing as much damage to himself. I'm shortchanging people. I'm not working hard. I said, you're working this gimmick. And now it's one of 3 different personalities that you have, and the other 2 do enough damage to your body for all 3 of them. So enjoy a little break, work the gimmick, and the people like it. Don't feel bad. But he felt bad that he wasn't working hard enough because he wasn't taking all the big bumps as Dude Love. But Vince liked the shot of the feet.
Well, Jim, Vince focused on Mick Foley's ears, and a lot of the listeners are focusing on their ears with Raycon.
That's exactly right. The Raycon wireless earbuds. And I'll tell you something else. If you want to enjoy those groovy tunes from the 70s and 80s, or if you want to go all the way back to the 60s and playing mounds of sounds and stacks of wax all designed with you in mind, here's one's guaranteed to blow your mind from 1965, that golden year and the Lovin' Spoonful. Whatever you want to listen to, you can listen to them on the Raycon wireless earbuds, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a workout, whether it's an audio book, or whether it's just to listen to something enjoyable and not think about how miserable the bleak world outside you really is. Folks, you stick your Raycon wireless earbuds into one or even both, or in Hotchkiss Featherbottom's case, all 3 of your ear holes, and the world is pleasant again. No dangling wires, no stems to get in your way, stylish colors, comfortable in-ear fits, discreet. Nobody will know you can be listening, and people won't know it. And they're built to perform anytime and anywhere, including being water and sweat resistant. If you sweat that much out of your ears, you might need to see a qualified physician. But folks, they've also got enough battery life for 6 hours of playtime. And the best part is they make great sound accessible to everyone with wireless earbuds starting at half the price of other premium audio brands. And right now, you get them even cheaper, because Raycon is offering 15% off all their products for my listeners, and yours too, Brian, right here on the Drive-Thru. And here's what you've got to do. You go to buyraycon.com/JCE, buyraycon.com/JCE, 15% off so you can grab a pair and a spare. And then you'll have a spare pair to spare. 15% off, BUYRAYCON, buyraycon.com/JCE.
Well, Jim, let's get another question here. This one sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Timmy in Texas.
Timmy!
Hey, y'all. Love
Timmy.
the show.
Timmy!
You're doing South Park
Timmy.
now.
Timmy.
All right, let's calm ourselves now. Lex Luger is being brought up in social media as a future WWE Hall of Famer. The general notion is that he has paid for his mistakes. If Chris Benoit's actions, which were much more heinous, is still blacklisted, trying to make sense of some of the writing here.
We're going south fast.
Very fast. Should Lex Luger be eligible for the WWE Hall of Fame despite any of his past actions? And should he be blacklisted from the WWE Hall of Fame?
They didn't put Benoit in before.
He's not in after. Yeah, he's not in. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is, I don't know how he's making this equivalency in that. No, obviously, if they'd have put him in beforehand, I don't know if they'd have taken him out or if they'd have just ignored it or if they'd have publicly taken him out. But with Luger, I don't know whether Vince is still mad at him. I don't know where that stands, but it seems like if he wasn't, then he would have popped up somewhere doing something with him before now. But was he part of any lawsuits?
I don't know.
Recently?
But you know why he may be mad at him? What was his first gimmick in WWE?
The narcissist. Carrying
a mirror everywhere he went. Vince hates mirrors.
Oh, for heavens. But anyway, no, I mean, especially at the current state of affairs with the names that they are sometimes, lobbing up there as Hall of Fame worthy, Lex Luger for 1987 to 2000 would be up there, I would think. Would you not?
I would think so. He was a big star in WCW. He was a big star in the WWF, even though they bungled his push, not having him defeat Yokozuna, and then having him go from the Yokozuna feud into the Ludwig Borga feud.
Yeah, that rip-roaring heated feud with Ludwig Borga.
You probably have seen him before the pandemic in the last few years. Is Luger wheelchair bound or can he walk?
I don't want to be the one to make that adjudication, but every time I've seen him, he's been in a chair over the last few times that I've seen him, and it's been several years ago for the last time. But he told me the story because he had several things go on, and I had seen him once years ago, and he said the initial trouble that he had with the nerve in his neck, believe it or not, he had spent like 3 or 4 hours on a long flight with his head turned, talking to the person next to him, and the package has become a chatterbox in his later years. And then he realized he'd fucked up his neck some kind of way, and that started some kind of nerve problem. And then he's had, other issues, and, he looks nothing like physically, unfortunately, that he did back in the day. But I think by everybody's account that comes in contact with him, he's much happier, nicer, calmer. I mean, not like he was a big asshole to begin with, but just a calmer, friendlier, more humble, nicer person, even with his situation. I would think, yes, that I don't know how Vince can be mad that bad for him fucking bailing on him. Would he, if Rick Rude was around, would he still be pissed at Rick Rude for that? That's the same thing.
He put Jeff Jarrett in the Hall of Fame.
He put Jeff Jarrett in the Hall of Fame. So I don't know. Is Vince pissed off because Lex was a spectacular? Lex's original push in his company was a spectacular failure, and it was kind of Vince's fault. Or did it? And when Vince fell out of love with him as the guy by WrestleMania 10 in 1994, it wasn't Lex's fault. He was doing the same shit he'd always done. And as we've gone back and said, if you take 1989 Lex Luger and watch him with today's eyes, he'd be one of the biggest fucking in-ring stars in the business, one of the best workers.
Absolutely.
So I don't know.
I guess at best, some of the things you would hear about him in the 90s were that he was aloof at times. he had a little bit of a reputation sometimes amongst fans, at least. I don't know about guys in the business. But when you saw him after everything he went through, did he change? I mean, was he the same guy, or did he seem nicer or anything?
That's what I just, said, is that now that, he's not on top of the world in terms of being a big star in wrestling, and he hasn't, been inducted in the Hall of Fame or whatever, and he's got the physical problems. He's happier, calmer, more pleasant, polite. Like I said, he wasn't an asshole, but Lex, when he got in the wrestling business, he didn't really understand it. And they hired him because of his incredible genetics, his physique, the way he looked. He'd be the next Hulk Hogan. But he didn't really understand the business. And he had the thing with Brody because he didn't understand the business. And then he comes into Crockett. Crockett gave him the first big guaranteed contract because he wanted the guy that was going to be the guy to compete with Hulk Hogan. And he puts him in the Horsemen so that he's surrounded by the absolute best talent in the world so they can teach him. But Lex, the reason why we said he made a better heel than he did a babyface, Lex was not a confident person in his personality in wrestling. He didn't connect with the fans. He was perfect in a lot of ways. He had a high grade point average. He had that incredible physique. He had that kind of way of stance and talking of, he was looking down his nose at people, even though he wasn't really. And, that led to him being a more natural heel. And also when he was a heel, he could say things, he could act out more, and it wasn't really him doing it. He's one of those kind of guys that had to be somebody else to turn their personality on. And as a heel, it came across better because what did the fans have in common with this guy? He wasn't an everyman. He went to a big college and he got great grades and he fucking has a perfect body and he's got a big contract. The big contract got him all kinds of heat with a lot of the boys because he got a big contract because of the way he looked. He grew into it. He learned. He worked hard. But to have Lex Luger signed at least to a contract guaranteeing him more money than Ric Flair, even though Flair was making more, so he had problems in the locker room adjusting. He would say things that he didn't really realize was kind of being snotty to the guys. Like, I've told this story before, but it's been a while. He had a first-class plane ticket in his contract with Crockett, whereas back in those days, if it was a 500-mile or less flight, you could upgrade if you had a frequent flyer for like $20. So one day we're on Delta and we're both in first class, me and the package. And, I'm just trying to make a little conversation because I'm nervous on planes anyway. And so I said, Lex, he played football in Memphis for that, was it USFL? Was that the team?
I believe so, yeah.
Anyway.
Showboats.
There you go, the Memphis Showboats. You played football in Memphis. I said, you must have watched Memphis wrestling. But I figured this is an easy question. This is when he first got to the territory, and it's an easy question. Everybody in Memphis watched fucking wrestling. It was, state law. And he said, well, it was on a few times in the locker room when we come back from practice, but I never really watched much of it. Oh, I said, well, and then I had to ask, I said, Lex, what would you do if you were in the Memphis territory starting out now instead of Crockett and you were, making $400 a week? He said, oh, I wouldn't be doing that. Oh shit, I'd be doing something else. So in other words, he just told me or anybody else who all of us did that. Well, I wouldn't do that, but he didn't know. So he came off a bit heelish to the people and to the boys sometimes, and also there was the natural attitude that a guy looks like that has had a lot of people make over him, as they used to say, as Aunt Lola would say, all of his life. And so he was kind of, full of himself, but you need to be a star. But he wasn't an asshole. He just, in his early years especially, he didn't really get wrestling. And then I think Crockett was the best place for him, and really WCW, while all the Crockett guys like Flair and the Horsemen and Sting and all of his friends and all the people that he had really grown into this spot with were there, but when they started going away, or it started being a big fucking business under Turner, and then all the mid-90s bullshit, and he got the pills going on, and at that point, I think that was probably not the best time in his wrestling career.
Well, let's get some more questions.
All righty then.
Jim. This next one sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi. Brian Pillman Jr. Hey, come on, give Mr. Pillman Jr. a chance.
I'm talking
Brian
about
Pillman Jr.
I'm talking about Starley from Charkville.
Brian Pillman Jr.
There are 15 now. There are like 15 or 20 Charlie from Starkville Twitter parody accounts now.
He's very popular. Brian,
I wouldn't apply that word. He's notorious, maybe. I don't know about popular. Go ahead.
Brian Pillman Jr., as I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Recently said he had an idea for Steve Austin and the Varsity Blondes if he ever joined AEW. Pillman said, quote, "My ultimate ploy is that he would be our coach, and it would come out of the curtain in a tracksuit and whistle, and if we didn't hit the ropes right, he's like, drop and give me 50. He's on us. He's a total football coach." What do you think of Brian Pillman Jr.'s idea for Steve Austin and AEW?
Well, it's probably better than what anybody else in AEW would come up with for Steve Austin, but I don't know that I see Stone Cold jumping up and down and doing jumping jacks to get in shape for a spot like that. Do you?
No, and it did wonders for John Tolis.
The coach. Yeah, no. And I love Brian, and he's come a long way. I've enjoyed his recent work. As we've mentioned, he's a fine young man, but he doesn't need to be a booker yet. If they got Steve Austin, and why didn't we just preface this by saying Brian Pillman has an idea for Santa Claus? Because he's going to show up about the same time as Steve Austin does in AEW. But if Steve Austin was going to be employed by, working with, appearing on, or in any other way affiliated with the AEW organization, the first thing that they should not do is put him with the Varsity Blondes as a coach.
That would be the worst thing you could do with Steve Austin.
No. Now, think about who you're talking to, first of all. You're talking to the people at AEW. And think about what kind of territory that takes in. It would be better for him to be the coach of the Varsity Blondes than it would for him to go 15 minutes with Dwarf Dongsucker.
Well, he's not having a match. If we're going under the auspices that Steve Austin...
Well, he's not. No, wait a minute now. We've completely made this up wholly out of our ass. Completely out of our anal orifice is made up. It is never going to happen. It is an exercise in mental masturbation to begin with. But now you're going to put rules on it. Well, he's not going to wrestle in AEW.
Yeah, there are rules.
Can't go too far.
If Steve Austin went to AEW, he's not going to have a match. So what would you do with him? And of all the options, one of the worst ones would be a new gimmick, the coach for the Varsity Blondes. A young undercard babyface tag team.
Okay, I can still tell you what would be worse. The Cucamonga kids could super kick him.
That would be worse.
That would be worse.
All right. Well,
then that's one of the reasons why that you wouldn't bring Steve Austin to AEW unless he could wrestle. Because the price tag of that would be so incredibly high to convince him for some reason that he should burn his bridge with the WWE that owns the entire video library of his career and is still probably going to be paying him healthy residuals until the cows come home, et cetera, to go to announce a YouTube show for AEW or maybe he could be one guy's manager and Arn could be Cody's manager, and then they could have a manager's match so we could actually have something good. Steve Austin versus Arn Anderson. But then he'd have to wrestle, and he ain't going to wrestle, so no. That wouldn't, and if he did take $15 million in, small unmarked bills from Tony Khan to appear on AEW, he wouldn't be the coach of the Varsity Blondes. I honestly don't know what you could do with Steve Austin that wouldn't overshadow every single other member of your roster or everybody else on the television program. And then you wouldn't be able to fulfill the people's thirst and lust for Steve Austin by having him wrestle if he couldn't wrestle.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Martin in Lisbon, Portugal. I was recently watching an old Dusty Rhodes shoot interview from 2000, and he was very candid about how much money he was making at various stages of his career. When talking about his eventual move to the Crockett territory to take over the book, he noted that he demanded $3,000 a week as booker, had points on 7 different towns, and extra on top to wrestle. So realistically, Dusty could have been making upwards of $400,000 in 1984. Does that seem feasible to Jim? How many other non-owners would be making close to that back then?
I don't know if it was feasible in 1984 because their business was down a little bit, the house show business, but he was making more than that by 85 and 86. So, we're in the neighborhood, even if it might not be exact. And that wasn't ridiculous. We've talked about it before. If you were in an ownership position or in a booking position, as well as being a wrestler, that was the highest paid position, besides being the promoter and owning the whole goddamn company. The best position you could be in was having some ownership of a territory or being the booker, because then if you were the booker, you were usually a main event wrestler as well, so you were the highest paid guy in the territory, whatever that territory may be. And of course that had, it ranged widely depending on the territory. Frank Morrell told me one time when Buck Robley was booking Kansas City in like 1982 or 3, business was blah. And he asked Frank if he wanted to come in, and Frank said, "Well, how much money can I make, Buck?" And Buck said, "Well, I made $300 last week, but that was for working and booking." And he said, "I don't think I can afford to come work for you, Buck." But with Crockett's territory, $3,000 a week to be the booker, if it was successful, was not an exorbitant fee. And of course, he would have paid Dusty to wrestle on the shows as well, because Dusty was one of the, at the time, definitely 5 biggest box office attractions. And there were periods of time where it was him, the WWF champion, and Andre. It just depended. So, and I know for a fact that, especially in the hot period of 85 and 86, when I was there, I know what we were making, and I know that Flair and Dusty were making 2 or 3 times that per night. So it's very easy to think that in 1986, Dusty would have made over $300,000 just for wrestling. And I've never heard specific numbers or if he had points in the towns, but that
was what was interesting to me. What towns would he have had points in?
Well, see, and I'm guessing here, but it's a learned guess. A lot of the territories had what were called office towns, and then the other towns that they ran regularly, they went through a different a local promoter in that area, and he paid the office a booking fee for the talent that he got. In other words, he ran the show, he paid all the expenses, he paid the boys, and he sent the office back 10% of whatever the fucking gross gate was or whatever the deal was as the booking fee for giving him the talent and the promotion of the event on the company's television programs. Would Crockett have said, "Hey, I'll give you a couple of points in the office towns," was Charlotte, Greensboro, probably some of the core towns there? I don't know that. I never got that deep into Dusty's business. But that's something that also happened in wrestling. In the Atlanta promotional war that we've talked about so many times, 72 through 74, the way that the Briscoes and Buddy Colt, the way that several of the boys got points in the Georgia office was that Eddie Graham orchestrated it to try to give them incentive to want to see that town, want to see their side win the promotional war and Atlanta to flourish. So they gave him points in the new company. Lawler, I've mentioned, for a long period of time before he was complete partners with Jerry Jarrett, had his payoff for Memphis. He had 10% of Memphis because he was so integral to the town and to them drawing money. So if the house in Memphis was $30,000 on a Monday night, which it was often, then he'd get $3,000, and that was 40 years ago. What is $3,000 from 1981 today?
I will look that up right now.
And the same thing was done. It was done not just willy-nilly, but on a need-to basis when you had a star that was so important to your town or your territory or a certain, part of your territory, whatever the case, that you would give them points to make sure that they wanted to stay there, not go somewhere else, and that they had a concerted effort to. The boys always wanted to work hard because the theory was when the house was up, your money is up. And that was technically true, but you were still at the mercy when you were just one of the boys of the promoter and how he figured the payoffs. And it could be Paul Bosch and you'd be all happy, or it could be Nick Gulas and you'd be, oh, fuck.
$3,000 in 1981 is $8,680.33 today.
Okay, he'd make that on Lawler would on Monday nights in Memphis for turning right on Walnut Grove Road and driving 10 miles to the Coliseum. And that's without wrestling the other nights of the week, and then he became a partner to promotion. We've mentioned Ole Anderson was not only being paid as a main event guy in the Carolinas and was a main event guy in Georgia, but was booking in Georgia for Barnett. And that was the late 70s, early 80s before they had their split. He had years where he made $250,000 in the Carolinas and the state of Georgia all in and didn't have to go anywhere. Your booker was your most important part of your promotion because he was the football coach. He assembled the team. He was the screenwriter. He envisioned the angles and the matchups and the finishes. And if you had a good booker that could draw you money, then you took care of him. And Barnett was notorious for, taking, what was it, Jerry Jarrett? When he had Jarrett come down and book Atlanta that period of time, I think he gave Jarrett a couple $1,000s a week or something to just come down on Friday, do the Omni show, do the fucking TV on Saturday, have a meeting, and fucking go back to Nashville. But, it worked. They did business. So, yeah, the point is that is not unheard of, and it's entirely possible that Dusty made over $400,000 in 1984 because he made well over that in 85 and 86, and even though 87 sucked, probably close to as well.
Well, we have another Dusty Rhodes story that apparently is from a shoot interview. This was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Steve in Frederick, Maryland. There's a shoot interview in which John Nord tells a story about his time in AWA, in which he describes how heavier wrestlers would wedge toilet paper.
What?
He describes how heavier wrestlers would wedge toilet paper up in their ass cracks to help control the smell a bit. Apparently the boys had a pretty awesome name for it, a muffler. Nord tells a story about how he was wrestling Dusty Rhodes, and Dusty's muffler fell out mid-match. Questions? 1, this story seems kind of a stretch, and a lot of the details don't add up in the particular timeline, but listening to this video, could the story be accurate at least mostly as described? 2, if not, was the practice of wedging toilet paper between their butt cheeks an actual known practice by heavier wrestlers for hygiene purposes? And finally, question 3. If so, do you have any personal stories involving muffler mishaps you would like to share?
Where do I start? I have never heard of the muffler. Now, but here's the thing. I'm not saying necessarily John Nord was even a liar. Is it very possible, indeed entirely possible, that Dusty had the shits that day and just thought, I'm just going to shove some toilet paper up the crack of my ass and put my trunks on, baby. So if I shit, it won't come out in my fucking, tights or whatever. That may be.
Well, where did he work with Dusty?
Well, but here's the thing. I'm about to get to it. Dusty didn't work at EAWA at that period of time that Nord was around. So I don't know where they crossed paths, but I'm willing to, okay, that happened somewhere in the wide, wide world. Was Dusty Rhodes capable of it when the shit fell out of the shit? When the toilet paper fell out, just to be specific, was he capable of taking and creating a backstory and ribbing a guy? My muffler fell out, baby. Yes, on the spot. Yes, he could have done that. And Nord was not, he didn't grow up around wrestling. He wasn't around wrestling very long. And he may have been one of those guys that was easily convinced of things. And he may have thought that was the whole goddamn deal. I don't know, but we worked with Dusty many times. Nothing ever fell out of his tights. And he never even wore his tights in the locker room. He was famous for walking around with his maybe he'd have a fucking baseball cap on and probably have his cowboy boots on, but he'd be completely naked otherwise. And I never saw any toilet paper hanging out of the crack of his ass.
Have you ever heard of this practice?
The practice is a new one on me also. So I'm thinking but a lot of this shit, you can see where there would be truth to it the way the guy tells it, because Dusty Rhodes is entirely capable of fucking having something, ribbing John Nord or anybody else on having something falling out of his ass. So I can't say that, but I mean, that's a fucking thing. Jackie Fargo used to walk in the locker room. He'd be completely naked. He'd be around the new guys, and they'd sitting on the bench, and he's walking around. Hey, has anybody seen my toothbrush? And he'd turn his back on them and bend over to look under somebody's bag, and the toothbrush would be sticking out of his ass. And he'd just wait to see if anybody bothered to mention it.
That's only the second worst thing a Fargo brother did in the locker room to initiate new wrestlers.
Yes. Well, are you talking about the chewing gum or the nail and the hammer?
I was thinking of the nail and the hammer.
Well, Don Fargo had, before it was fashionable, had his dick pierced. So to make people uneasy, they'd be walking in the locker room the first night in the territory, and there Don Fargo would have a ball-peen hammer and a 10-penny nail nailing his dick to the fucking stool. But there was another thing the Fargos used to do together. When fucking Don would come in, Jackie'd be sitting there naked, and Don would say, "Goddamn, anybody got any chewing gum?" And Jackie would pull the foreskin of his dick back and pluck some out and go, "Here, Donnie." And he'd take it and start chewing it and walk off.
Well, we'll see if that makes YouTube. Our next question, Jim.
What, did we answer the last question?
I don't know. Is there an answer?
I don't know. And I've had diarrhea a couple times where I had to wrestle, and every time I took a bump, I shit all over myself, but it was just my problem. Nobody else had to worry about it.
Our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Jeff Pollard in Leesville, Louisiana. What are Jim's memories of Black Bart? I saw a shoot interview, and he was crazy, to say the least. He said that Jim Ross sold dope to all the Mid-South wrestlers, and Bill Watts knew about it. Was Black Bart always that crazy, and do you have any stories of him?
Oh, my God. Well, Black Bart always was crazy and still is. I hope he is. I haven't seen him in a few years, but I saw him, 5 or 6 years ago down in Texas when we were down there for that NWA event. Ricky Harris Bart was just a guy from Texas that liked the wrestling business and I'm trying to think who trained him and who broke him in. God damn it. But then he worked in a variety of places. He was Rick Harris, and he worked a lot of the Southern Territories for a few years. And then, don't know how it happened, but he got the Black Bart gimmick, which obviously was a, cowboy and a rope and a big chaw of chewing tobacco and the horseshoe on the back of the tights and everything. And Bart, he was Texas through and through, and he really talked like that. As a matter, when you're sitting in the car with him, he said, God damn it, buddy. He and Buddy Landell used to drive each other crazy because Buddy Landell, Black Bart drove him crazy being an old Texas redneck, and Buddy drove Bart crazy being a bleach blonde purdy boy. But if you ride in the car with him, Bart would say, Buddy Landell, get up. What's the matter with you? You ain't got no sense. Would you leave me alone, Bart? So one night, we're coming back from Albany, Georgia to Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's 450 miles, and we're not going to be back till 6 a.m. And me and Bart are sitting in the back, and Dennis Condrey, I think, is driving the van, and Bobby's up in the front. And as I said, we're all in a van. And I didn't drink beer, but I've got my soft drinks back there. I was still on the Pepsi at the time, but everybody else was drinking those little small Millers, the Miller Pony bottles. Bobby Eaton loved those. Well, Bart was talking so loud, Buddy was trying to go to sleep, and Bart wouldn't let him, and they got to jousting with each other. And finally, Buddy's like, God damn it, Bart, leave me alone, let me sleep. Buddy goes to sleep, and Bart looks at me and says, I dare you. Pour, because he's pissing, so we didn't have to stop. He's pissing in the Miller bottles, right? He said, I dare you to pour this bottle of piss on Budrow. And I don't want to I'll take care of you. All right, because I know who I've got my money on between Bart and Buddy at that particular point in time. So he handed me the bottle of piss, and I poured the bottle of piss all in Buddy's lap and everything, and I handed it back and sat back down. Buddy wakes up wet. He's like, God damn it, Bart, did you pour water on me? No, Buddy, I didn't pour no water on you. I didn't pour any water on you either, Buddy. I'm sitting over here. He didn't realize what it was until he got home that morning. It was daylight by the time he walked in the door, and his dogs came barking and started humping him. But Bart, he loved the Hatfield and McCoy feud because he was there in working for Crockett when we first got there in the summer of '85, and we'd go on a lot of those drives together because he knew Dennis from before, knew Bobby, whatever. Anyway, and so he was just country Texas. It wasn't a gimmick, and he wasn't even actually turned up that loud on television. That's the way he was, and his wife, Miss Bonnie's gonna give me a big old spread for dinner when I get home tonight. Boy, I'll tell you what. That's just the way Bart was. He was a great guy, wonderful to be around, always a lot of fun. But specific stories about great angles and matches with Black Bart involved, I wasn't paying that close attention. We rode with him a lot, but I never worked with him at a professional basis.
Was Jim Ross selling dope to the wrestlers?
Oh, I forgot about that. Not that I was aware. Once again, JR gets a lot of heat with people. But here's the thing. As soon as you get in the office anywhere, you got a lot of heat. No, when we were in Mid-South in 1984, JR was the television announcer that you saw every 2 weeks. And he would have had to been a busy fella to be doing all that once every couple of weeks. So we were gone by the time that JR was making the rounds in Mid-South. I have no idea. I've never heard that before, but who am I to call Black Bart a liar?
Well, if that was his side business, I would think he's doing really well in AEW right now.
They need some drugs. That's the problem. Is apparently they need the drugs that they give the kids these days to calm down and focus. Because everybody used to be able to calm down and focus. They needed the drugs so that they could be fucking crazy. Well, now everybody's crazy. They need the drugs so they can calm down and focus.
Well, Jim, another thing they need in AEW is some pain relief.
A good pain reliever. Because I can tell you about pain, baby. And I can only imagine with the way that the guys hurt and beat up and destroy their bodies in the old days, what these knuckleheads are going to be walking like, if they can walk at all, or feeling like when they're 40 or 45 or 50. But folks, you don't need to feel like a dirty old sack of wet hammers when you get up out of bed every morning, because you can get Omax Cryo Freeze. Avoid unnecessary trips to the doctor, trips to the chiropractor, trips to the masseuse. Well, it's never unnecessary to go to a masseuse, just depending on whether they rub you the right way or not. But right now, if you've got arthritis, backaches, muscle soreness, joint pain, and you want a drug-free solution, you owe it to yourself to try the product that you've heard about everywhere, including on this program. The Cryo Freeze CBD Pain Relief Roll-On is an all-natural topical pain reliever that ices out the pain with the big 1-2 punch of super cold menthol and hemp CBD. Roll it onto your back, your neck, your hands, your knuckles, whatever. Don't put it in your eyes after you watch AEW. That will not relieve that kind of pain. But CryoFreeze contains 10 powerful ingredients that combine to provide a powerhouse dose of relief that lasts up to 8 hours. You just roll it right on. They've got so many great products, the Sport Recovery Cream, the one-a-day supplements. But, folks, whatever it may be, the CryoFreeze or anything else, if you go to Omax, that's OMAX Health.com right now and enter the code DRIVE, OmaxHealth.com, and enter the code DRIVE, D-R-I-V-E, you get 20% off the CryoFreeze or anything else on the site. 20% off a 1-month supply of CryoFreeze or anything else on the site. OmaxHealth.com, enter code DRIVE. Boy, I've got a pain in my keister I'd like to get rid of.
Mars bars may help.
Hey!
All right, let's get another question
here. And here's another thing. How would you know? Well, I guess you can count them going up. I was thinking if they had to come out to be counted, how would you be able to differentiate the Mars bar from a natural?
Why did your mind
biological
go there?
Production?
Why did you go there? I was not even considering that.
Well, I'm thinking about what was that movie? What the movie where there was the candy bar was in the swimming pool and caused a lot of consternation?
Caddyshack.
Oh, how could I forget? Of course, it was one of those type of deals. Where did that candy bar come from?
Our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Austin. Jim, what do you think AJ Styles' legacy will be when he retires?
Well, that was short and to the point. God, that was out of the blue. I mean, AJ's been a great talent. He's very, over a long period of time, he's been very consistent because he was so athletic. His early years, the promos were not earth-shattering, but I've heard him of late speak with more confidence. He's had a great career. He spent a lot of it in TNA where, honestly, there was a ceiling where anybody was only going to go so far, but in Japan, and I think it's great he didn't go straight from TNA to the WWE, or it probably wouldn't have worked out well, and that would have been mostly WWE's fault, but at least he was able to go to Japan, get over somewhere else, and not be coming in fresh as a TNA guy that they might not have, wanted to treat so well. But God, I don't necessarily know what his legacy is. Is he ready to be written off? Are we putting the period on the end of the sentence of his career already? How old is AJ? I always think everybody's young.
I think he's around my age, 41.
Yeah, so, he's got a ways left to go. You're not too broken down yet.
I'm good. Omax.
Yeah. Omax, there you go, and Athletic Greens.
That's right.
So I don't know maybe his legacy is yet to be written. That sounded like a Stephanie McMahon answer, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I guess part of the issue, if I'm just going to assume here, is that he's had a pretty good run in WWE. He had a great run in New Japan. While he was used, for the most part, well in TNA, it was TNA. So how do you judge that portion of his career, which was the majority of his career?
Well, you judge it as he was the WWE wasn't going to use him properly unless he had been to those other places and also waited for the right time, because if he had gone to the WWE when he went to TNA, he'd have been on whatever their equivalent of 205 Live was at that point in time. They weren't ready yet. But after the Daniel Bryans and the other guys that, made it a little more acceptable, I think it was easier for them for whoever was his backer or champion or proponent in WWE to sell to Vince, hey, I know he's only 5'7", but look at him. He's phenomenal. So, it wasn't his fault. And there was no place else for him to be and make guaranteed money. He was making, money in TNA, even if he wasn't drawing any, but that wasn't his fault because nobody else was either. So I think he was better off to stay there where they would use him on top. People could see how good he was. He'd make a decent amount of money and wait for the time when the WWE caught up to the idea of using a guy that can perform well, even if he's not that big.
All right. That was a bit of a non-answer. Let's get another question.
I don't know
here.
what else to say.
This next question.
He's not fucking Gorgeous George. He didn't revolutionize the whole business, and he's not a schlub, so I can't knock him. And where else was he supposed to fucking go?
Somewhere else on this great big flat earth.
Where else on this great big flat earth?
Our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Justin in West Virginia.
See? West Virginia.
What am I seeing there? What's the point?
I mentioned it before, and there they are again.
I wanted Jim to give his opinion.
There's some fine people in West Virginia. We'll talk about one of them later on.
I wanted Jim to give his opinion on AEW referee Aubrey Edwards saying on Instagram to a fan that any tag above the waist, backslap or no, is a legal tag. She said this to a fan who questioned the nature of the tag team match rules, and to have the exact quote, he put a image here. So someone, maybe this was you, the name is Kentucky Dankmaker. Can we do something about all the backslap tags? Shit's not legal, but AEW is pretty lax on the rules. Almost like kayfabe isn't a thing. You gotta have rules to have quality heels. This is where AEW is missing the mark. Pun intended.
There you go.
Referee Aubrey replied, it's a legal tag if the tag is above the waist.
Okay.
To which Kentucky Dankmaker replied, oh, go ahead.
Who says? Where has that ever been a thing? Where was that written down? In what rule book? Where was it ever announced? These are the questions I have. But she's been told this by one of the other knuckleheads in the company, or she made it up right there, sitting there out of her ass on her own. But no, that's never been a thing ever in wrestling. You can't fucking tag somebody at the top of somebody's fucking head, just like you can't tag the tip of their toe or slap them on the back. If it had been a thing that you could do, wouldn't people have been doing it? Until like fucking 5 years ago when everybody just said, fuck it. There's no rhyme or reason to any of this shit. The previous 125 years, people wouldn't have been doing it. But I'm sorry. I apologize. Referee Aubrey Edwards knows much more about wrestling than I do, because after all, look at the difference in our experience level. Look at the difference in just the length of our involvement in wrestling. She's been around much longer than me and at a much higher level and in many more companies, and operated her own training programs and run her own businesses and worked with the absolute best that the industry has had to offer over the past 50 years, much more than I have. So who am I to tell referee Aubrey the rules of wrestling?
What are other absolute tag team rules that have to be there for it to be real tag team wrestling in your eyes? Is the tag rope a necessary thing or just a nice thing? What do you think?
No, the tag rope is nice, and it does add an element of legitimacy and rules and sportingness to the contest. But for the territories that didn't use a tag rope, it was still very simple. Your one hand has to be on the turnbuckle to signify that you are in your corner. That's the same thing as holding the tag rope. The tag rope was what? A foot long, 2 feet long, and tied to the turnbuckle, so you have to be in your corner, either holding the tag rope or having your hand on the top of the turnbuckle signifies that. That's why so many times, if you go back and look, and I mean, of course, as long as a guy was obviously visually standing in the corner and they get the hot tag, especially, nobody's going to fucking, cry about it. But you'll look at some of the old films and you'll see a guy that's trying to exhort his partner who's being beaten up in the ring to make the tag. The guy has his left hand on the top turnbuckle and his left arm stretched out straight and his right arm stretched as far in the ring as he can with his hand going, come here, come here, come here, to signify that he's touching the buckle and he's reaching as far as he can. And please, it's only a few more inches, right? And the people are getting, please reach a few more inches, make the tag. That's how you milk it. So tag rope, not necessary if you're putting your hand on the buckle, whatever. But that's, the rules of tag team wrestling are not so restrictive that you can't have an exciting match. It's the same. Remember when they said, because it's tag matches, they have a 10 count now to break instead of a 5 count? Where did that go? You remember that from about a year ago?
I don't remember that, no.
Oh, you don't know? It was over. It was more than a year ago now. It was when they first went on the air. Go back or ask some of the AEW fans. The thing was, they announced that the rule was changed. When you make a tag, instead of a 5 count to get out, you've got a 10 count because it's a tag team. So you can double team for 10 seconds. And then they forgot about that too, like they do everything else. But when you make a tag, got a 5 count to switch. Tags are hand to hand with one guy holding the tag rope, and you can't be standing on the bottom rope. Both feet have to be on the apron. This shit used to be written down and printed in programs that the promotions would disseminate around, so everybody was with it. But 2 feet flat on the fucking ring, holding the tag rope or the turnbuckle, and the tag over the top rope, you can't reach through the ropes. And hand to hand. That way, you had little things that you could do where the heels would try to, the referee wouldn't allow the tag because the heel reached between the second rope and the third rope instead of over the top, whatever the fuck. It's rules, basic, simple, not complicated, but some parameters, some guardrails for the highway you're going down so that it gives the impression of a professional sport with some restrictions. I don't know what else, but now it's just a goddamn clusterfuck stunt show where everybody does everything and there's a referee standing there watching it. That's why it all looks so silly.
That's right. And usually that referee's bald.
I don't know. Maybe it's all the worry. It's all the worry these referees go through. It causes them to lose their hair. They're always worried because all these guys are doing shit and not paying any attention to them.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Pete Murphy. When talking about the Montreal Screwjob, there is always talk and speculation about who knew and who didn't. One person who must have known, but is never mentioned, the music guy. Sean's music played right after the bell rang, which makes it seem like they knew. What can you tell us about the music guy from that time?
Well, I hate to pop anybody's bubble and ruin what seems to be a good loophole, but the thing is, at that point in time, in the old days with a shoestring television production, and like we shot it on Smoky Mountain Wrestling or whatever, yeah, you found a loophole. But at that time, with the truck and the equipment and the amount of people on the crew, if you wanted to play anybody's music, all you had to do in the truck, if you're the producer or the director, all you have to do is turn to your fucking audio guy, whichever one is in charge of the music, and go, hit so-and-so's music. It's just a button. It's cued. So, I mean, imagine on all those live Raws over all those years, you think that all that shit was carefully scripted out ahead of time, especially when Shit Stain was around and they were changing shit left and right. A lot of times it just play so-and-so's music. Boom, hit the button. There you go. So it's not, it's not a gotcha moment like it you would think it was if you weren't sitting in the truck.
All right, next question. Sent to Corny Drive.
I'm sorry, I could flesh that out for another 20 minutes for you.
I think you answered it. But our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Coyote.
Wile-E to you.
Recently on Wrestling Observer Live, Dave Meltzer mentioned to Brian Alvarez that he thinks that the reason why NXT did not do as well this week in the ratings than AEW did was because they have a cookie-cutter style of wrestling. For example, everyone wrestles the same style trained by the induction area they start at. I don't know exactly what word he meant to use there. Rather than offer various forms of wrestling, like strong style, lucha libre, etc.
Oh, good God.
Do you agree? Do you think that those styles of wrestling that are not based on the American style of wrestling have not been pushed by WWE recently?
Well, now he's taking a turn there.
This whole email is interesting.
First of all, I agree with Uncle Dave that all the guys on NXT wrestle the same because they've been trained in the same system by people that are instructed to train them the same way, and that's a problem, and it sucks. So I agree there. How he cannot apply that same statement or principle to AEW, because even more so, at least you can follow the NXT matches, even if you don't like them. On AEW, as we've mentioned, it is literally the same shit over and over and over. Jump start, multiple man matches, ridiculous amounts of dives and stupid gymnastics and cheerleading routines to set up preposterous bumps that half of them miss and half of them make, and then some kind of finish, and then an afterbirth. And yes, I think there are room for different styles of wrestling also, but here's the common thread in most of the styles that are presented on AEW is the guys aren't any good at them. They're just doing shit that they're making up as they go along, or that they think was a good idea that they called in the locker room. There are very few. The only really quality workers that they have in AEW are the veterans that, like Christian and Kazarian and Daniels and those guys, that would work closer to a fucking WWE style than anybody else, because at least they know how to work and they've been well trained and they've got a lot of experience. But if you look at the scrambled egg mess, that's what we used to call it. You know, when guys would come back and have had a match that went all over the place and it didn't make sense, you couldn't follow it, the booker, whoever was going to dress you down, would say it was scrambled eggs. AEW, that's all they do is scrambled egg matches, whether they're strong style or lucha style and here's another thing. You're a fucking idiot if you think that you can put most, even good lucha workers in with just a regular American and have anything other than a clusterfuck, because it's going to throw them off. You have to have American guys that have spent a lot of time in either Mexico or Japan to be able to halfway learn that shit, and then they're just going to go for good quality cheerleading routines. But no, Dave was right about one, but he needs to apply the same thing to the other. They don't have the same kind of matches, but it's the same kind of thing. They do all the shit they do looks the same, and it just goes faster and makes less sense. There are a few world-class practitioners of this art on either channel, and they get over and do what they do well, and the rest of them are all doing the same shit, and they're indistinguishable from each other. Figure me out the difference between the Lucha Brothers on AEW and the Lucha Suits on NXT, except the Lucha Suits are not as dangerous or reckless in their work, and actually the match tries to make some semblance of sense. Otherwise, it's all the same.
I think the Lucha Brothers are better than the Lucha Suits.
No, they're not.
I think so.
They're not, because they miss as much as they hit. See, I don't care if you do the greatest shit in the world half the time. If the other half the time you're falling on your fucking face at people's feet, then you're the shits. Because you have done the one thing that it's unforgivable to do. From the time that I was a fan, when I was 9 years old, first watching this shit, I cringed when people missed shit and it was obviously fake. It was obviously they botched up something that they were both cooperating with each other to do. That is the cardinal sin in professional wrestling. When I was a fan, before I was even a photographer, I would look around and hope that other people didn't see what I just saw and it didn't register on them, because I knew that would be bad for the overall wrestling business. Every impression you make on a human being's brain is cumulative. And the more impressions of bullshit instead of the impressions of wow is bad for the business. Every time a person gets the bullshit impression instead of the wow impression, it has a cumulative effect. So I have always made that my cardinal sin. I don't care what else is wrong with the fucking match. If you do shit that's above your fucking capabilities and you fuck it up and it looks phony, that's the worst thing you can do in the fucking ring. I'd rather have somebody do basic shit and make it all look good and not see through. Because and somebody's going to say, well, that person wouldn't get over. Well, that person doesn't need to get over. Because if all of he can do is basic shit and make it look good, he can't make the good shit look good, then he doesn't need to get over. Don't fuck the business up trying to get over. That's the whole point with the whole concept of the existence of a team like the Young Bucks or these other goofballs. Just because you can't get over by doing this right doesn't mean that you should be allowed to prostitute it to your fucking specifications so that you can get yourself over and make the business look like shit for the rest of us that can do it right. So that's always been my thing. And the Lucha Brothers fall on their ass half the time. So I don't care what they do the other part. If you can't go all the way through a match without a buzz-killing moment that looks obviously phony, you shouldn't be in that fucking spot.
You said when you were a kid, you used to cringe when you would see that. Any examples? Was it Bruisers TV? Was it guys you saw live in Louisville?
Oh, boy. Well, I mean, there was always, especially in the mid-'70s, when you'd get some guys that Nick would book because they had so many towns going and et cetera, that in the opening match, somebody would do something and it was just, ooh. And sometimes even the people go, oh, like you'd hear the little grumble like, ooh, I think they're faking. Because it was not a goddamn foregone conclusion. And on Bruisers TV in the dying days of, oh my God, one of the worst things that I ever saw, I was already smart to the business by then, but everybody in the building groaned. The 1982, or was it 81? God damn it. 81. Because 82, I was about to get into business. But 81 WFIA convention was in Indianapolis. And that was 8 years too late. And one of the matches was Bobo Brazil against Tiny Tim Hampton, or when he was a heel, Traitor Tim Hampton, who was an obese at the time because he was in his 50s. And Bobo was, let's see, in 1981, Bobo, oh God, he was born 20. He had to be 60. Anyway, if he wasn't, he was close. And Tim Hampton was this obese, sloppy, fat African-American gentleman that they had a singles match. And Bobo backed him up and shot. Me and Brian Hildebrand were shooting pictures right at ringside next to each other, as we usually did, ended up at these shows. He was next to me in Memphis, next to me there. Bobo shot Tim Hampton off. And it took him, I'd say, a good 30 seconds to get to the other side of the ring and come back to Bobo. And Bobo, I mean, it was brutal. And Bobo just stood there and held up his elbow. And Tim Hampton ran at Bobo and at the right time ducked his head under the elbow and stopped with both feet and raised his head up under the elbow and hit his own self and took a bump.
No, come on.
And I'm like, oh, fuck, because they were so fucking old. And Tim Hampton had never been good anyway. He was one of the, I guess, I think he might have been related to Bobo in some way, shape, or form, but they'd used him in Detroit and the Midwest over the years a number of times, and sometimes as a manager. Anyway, those type of things you would see when the work level would go down in territories that were about to go out of business, and they would use, inexperienced guys or guys that were just completely out of shape or names that had long since, past their prime, and you would see stuff that looked like that, and it always just it didn't not just gave me a sick stomach, it made my heart hurt. I said every time, and that's why I always tried to, whatever I did physically, it may not have looked like it killed somebody, but it looked like I was trying with all of my heart. That was always the criminal offense to me, doing something that didn't look good or that you could visually, it slapped you in the face, was requiring cooperation. I know a lot of wise asses will say, well, somebody shot you into the ropes, you wouldn't come back. I got news for you. On certain occasions, especially if somebody like one of the Road Warriors or fucking Dr. Death or somebody got a little fucking excited, you'd come halfway back when they shot you in those ropes before you could stop yourself. But the point is that there are things in wrestling that came to be accepted visually as working, not as working in wrestling, but it worked. Visually, it worked. You couldn't see through it. It was accepted. This is the way things are. It didn't slap you in the face. If you sat down and micromanaged it, yes, you could figure it out. But in the moment, as you're looking at it, a live event or on TV without stopping and slow-moing it, oh, wow. But there were also things, and there now more than ever are, where they're slapping you in the face with obvious cooperation, where two grown adult men cannot stand on the top rope while fighting with each other without losing their balance. No, it can't happen. Not in any universe. Or all this other stupid shit where they wait to catch the diver. And they stand there slack-jawed and dumbfounded with a monotone expression on their face while somebody goes through 15 goddamn revolutions of a flip off the top rope so that they can give them a move. All you'd have to do is walk away from it. The obvious shit that nobody can fucking rationalize could really happen and is not the subject of cooperation. That's the worst criminal offense in a pro wrestling event, and that's why that I always rewarded guys that worked for me for doing a degree of difficulty of 5 and an execution of 10 instead of the other way around. If you're going to fucking expose the business, make everybody look like idiots, do it on somebody else's show. Don't do shit you don't know how to do, and don't fucking try to start doing college shit when you're still working on fucking grade school textbooks. Your basics, and go from there. If you can't fucking perform the shit that you were doing in the wrestling ring and make it look good to the people without obvious cooperation from your opponent, or without fucking falling on your face and not hitting the guy to begin with, don't do that shit, whether it gets you over or not. Because I don't care if you get over. I care if the business gets over and stays over. And you little pipsqueak individual who I'm talking about, whoever you may be out there, just because you can fucking get over doing some goofy shit that nobody was ever allowed to do before, and you find some idiot that'll let you do it, doesn't mean it's good for the business. It just means it's good for your fucking business. And I don't give a fuck about your fucking individual business when I'm talking about the entire goddamn wrestling business. And that's why that everybody now that doesn't watch wrestling anymore, which is the majority of people, think it's all a goddamn shit show, because all of a sudden everybody was just allowed to do whatever the fuck they wanted to do, whether it looked good or not. And all those impressions on individual people multiplied over a period of time has led to the average person now saying wrestling's a fake bunch of silly bullshit and we ain't going to watch it. So that's why fuck y'all. I hate you.
Well, it's too bad that you can't sue these perpetrators of fakeness in professional wrestling.
Boy, if I could sue these perpetrators and puppet masters, you know who I would get? You know who I would call in a second if I could figure out a way to sue these people for malfeasance in the wrestling business and failure to fucking keep up proper appearances? You know who I would call? Do you know? Do you know?
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Those are the rest.
That's exactly right. Whether it is fakery, treachery, criminality, and malfeasance in professional wrestling, or in nursing homes, the VA hospital, poisoned towns.
3M.
3M. What do they stand for? The Minnesota Manufacturing and Mining Monopoly? That's 4M's. Anyway, it was on Twitter. But nevertheless, all those people, Johnson & Johnson, for heaven's sake, let's not forget both of those big Johnsons. All of those people and more have been brought to their knees, had their knees freeze and their liver quiver, courtesy of the consigliere of the cult of Cornette, the attorney for the ages, Stephen P. New at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. Yes, he has brought numerous grown men to their knees in front of him, and he can do the same thing. Well, let's not say that way. He's brought people to justice, and he can do the same thing for you if someone has unjustified you. So regardless of what your issue may be, what your situation may be, give newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084 a call, and try to get even with Stephen. He will advise you on your situations. But once again, these major corporations and these heartless businesses and institutions that don't care about the little guy. Imagine being assaulted at a VA hospital. Imagine being mistreated in a nursing home. Stephen P. News on the side of the little guy. He will get even for what has happened to you, your family, your friends, and your close social circle of beloved enemies.
Well, Jim, let's get a few more questions and a few songs here on the show. This next one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Bill Wade. Hi, Jim. In the mid to late 70s, several of us would attend the weekly matches promoted by Nick Gulas in Chattanooga. One of my friends brought his sister along one night. We were standing in the hallway when George Gulas came up to her. For some reason, she gave him her number.
Uh-oh.
He bugged her until she agreed to go out with him. They dated a few times and eventually broke up. She told me some crazy things he would do, and most I did not believe. However, she said one of the strangest things she saw him do was to put his hand down his pants and then smell his fingers. I did not believe that a grown man would actually do that, and had forgotten the story until I read the Christine Jarrett book. In the book, it says that she and Jerry caught him doing that in the office in Nashville. Did you ever see George do any crazy things such as this?
Yeah, well, I started laughing when I heard that because I've heard that also. I did not spend a lot of time around George Gulas. I was a fan when he was wrestling in Louisville. I got his autograph on numerous occasions because he was the only one that would actually come out and stand there at the merchandise table and wait for people to ask him for his autograph. That was back before that was a thing. You didn't see unless you caught one of the guys coming in the back door and he waited out at the parking lot or whatever, or you caught him going to the concession stand to get a beer or a hot dog. You know, most of the time you didn't see it. But anyway, yes, I've heard that that's a thing that he would do. And I think I heard it from Teeny. And also, well, I hope George is listening, because by the time I got into business and started as a photographer, George didn't come to Louisville anymore, and that's what led to the split. because Jerry didn't want to book George in his end of the territory. But I also heard from Mike Duncan, who was the ring announcer in Louisville quite some time. He had done television for Nick back in the 70s. He was Teeny's nephew, and he'd been an announcer and like I said, did the TV. I think he did the TV for a while, not only in Nashville, but he also did either the Huntsville or Birmingham TVs at one point in time. Anyway, he told me the story that George was moving some furniture in his house and asked some of them to come over and help him move some stuff one day. And they went to move his old bed. And when they gripped it by the headboard, and they realized that evidently George used to lay in bed and pick his nose and reach up, and he had those long arms, and he'd wipe the boogers on the back of the headboard over his head. And there was a plethora. Some time it had taken to accumulate that amount of boogerage. But everybody also said George was a nice guy. And no, seriously, Bobby.
Yeah. We just talked about him putting his hand at his pants and smelling his fingers and putting boogers everywhere, but he's a nice guy.
But he was a friendly guy, and he didn't get it like, one time they went on a trip and it was him and Bobby and I can't remember some of the other boys, right? And or maybe it was Frank Morrell told me that. Anyway, the point is they would stop at a store to piss or whatever, get some beer or drink or a snack or whatever. And George would stop at the payphone and call Nick. Because when he just got into business, he was all thrilled and everything. He's like, yeah, Daddy, now we on a road trip and now we stopped to get some snacks. And now we go on to the town. And he's calling his dad to let him know about all these routine day-to-day things that everybody's doing. And meanwhile, they're like, what the fuck? This guy automatically is making more money than we are because he's the goddamn boss's son and he's being pushed into main events. We're having to drive him around, make sure he finds his way to the town. And now he's got to stop and call his dad and tell him how much fun we're having. And they got sandwiches one time. He said, we're going to have a picnic, Daddy. We're going to have a picnic. Yeah, we're having a picnic with bologna sandwiches because your dad won't pay us any more money so we can buy a fucking steak. So, but he didn't realize, it wasn't like he was an asshole or anything. He was just and I guess his dad had taught him or convinced him that he was going to be a major talent. As a matter of fact, David Williamson from down in Tennessee just sent me a DVD. And I had it on in the background while I was working in the action figure mines here a couple days ago. And it was the Continental show from Birmingham, Ron Fuller's Continental Wrestling show that they shot down in Alabama in 87 and 88. But it was on a Nashville station. WCAY, if that's even still a station. I think it's Channel 30 back in those days, but this was 1988. They got the Continental TV on in Nashville somehow, but they re-edited it. So it was the Continental program, but they had two local promo spots and an opening where it was the regular Continental opening, but somebody had taken and put in the very cheapest graphics that local TV stations ever used. It looks like the fucking Game Over on one of the early video games, that kind of font. Nick Gulas presents Continental Championship Wrestling. And then the first week of the show, they misspelled Gulas. It was Gulis instead of AS. Nick Gulas presents. And then there is Nick and George doing the local promos, announcing their spot shows that they had booked for Gulas World Wrestling. Gulas World Wrestling is coming back to Nashville, Tennessee, ladies and gentlemen. I know all of you have been asking. We've seen in the shopping malls and the grocery stores and all over the gas stations, when is Nick Gulas going to come back to professional wrestling in Nashville? The answer, ladies and gentlemen, is very soon. And here we are with Gulas World Wrestling, and we got a show, and they were advertising spot shows in like Lebanon, Tennessee, and somewhere else, and they were going to announce their big debut in Nashville, which they did finally by show number 5, and then the DVD froze up. But show number 5, they'd announced that brief time they started to run Nashville again at the National Guard Armory, which I think was a reason for Jerry Jarrett to do that angle where they brought Nick on their show
with Robert Fuller.
With Robert Fuller, because it was about that same amount of same time frame. But They didn't last but a couple months, but it was even then, and that was just a few years before Nick passed away, I think. But he was wanting to get back in wrestling, and George was convinced, and so was Nick, that just the name Nick Gulas in Nashville, even at that time, would instantly, all the wrestling fans would flock. And I mean, he was using Tojo, and Tojo was almost, to the end of his life, and poor Gypsy Joe, because he was local, and masked guys, and a girls boxing match. And I as a matter of fact, I'm going to send you a copy of this DVD. You'll love the audio because Nick does some of them, but he's having trouble with his voice. So he always used to have to do his local promos. That's how I grew up. The first local promos were Nick on Wednesdays in Nashville. They'd cut him for the whole territory. Even though he had different announcers, he had to do the local promos. And it sounded the same in that weird accent of his. Louisville Wrestling Fans, Tuesday night show store for one of the biggest cards I've signed in many years, headlined by a return grudge NWA Southern Heavyweight Championship match with the champion, the fabulous Jackie Fargo, taking on the challenger, Jerry the King Lawler. In the studio with me right now, I got none other than Jackie Fargo. And Jackie, I know you had a bad time last week. And then he would go on the entire 2 minutes and 30 seconds of how that the babyface got screwed the previous week and leave the babyface about 15 seconds to talk. And so Nick starts doing them, but then he's having problems with his voice. He must have had a cold. He starts, excuse me. And then we're going to have a 9-man battle royal. Excuse me. So then George does them for the next 3 weeks, and George is worse than Nick. I got to send these to you. You'd love it.
How would you explain that accent of his?
I don't know. He's Greek. Originally,
he wasn't born in Greece, was he?
Well, no, listen to me. Originally, his family is of Greek descent, but he was from fucking Birmingham. Nick Gulas, that's how he got in the business as a junior office boy in the Birmingham promotion back in the 30s. And then by the time, he met Roy Welch, they moved to Nashville and started the company. He was barely 30 years old back in the 40s, but he's in the 70s. He still talked like that. I tell you, boy, you got one of the, and he talked like a real old time, which he was 30s and 40s wrestling promoter, where he'd use that. Well, we got one of the top men in the nation coming in here, one of the top men in the nation. And even this was 1987, and George was reading off the notes of the card in La Follette, Tennessee, or whatever. He'd say, and we got one of the nation's top black mat stars, because that's the way they advertised him in the 60s. If Bearcat Brown came to a small town spot show in Alabama or Tennessee or whatever in the 60s, they would say, see, live in person, one of the nation's top black mat stars. That make all the black fans come out. But they're doing it in 1987, right? And he wasn't even one of the nation's top black mat stars.
Who was it?
I can't even remember. It's some local guy. But that was the thing. That's one of the things that was fascinating about Nick Gulas' territory, is that Roy Welch started Southern wrestling in the 30s, right? Organized Southern wrestling pretty much. And Nick started in the business as the young kid who was the Birmingham promoter. Goddamn, what was his name? Now all the Tennessee wrestling historians will kill me, but he started as an office boy for him. And a lot of the boys used to tell me when I got into business that what warped Nick was when he was the office boy for the Birmingham promoter, that he would have to ride to the towns in those big old cars, those old gangster cars like on the Untouchables, where you get 5 grown men in the back seat, right? And they'd make him ride in the fucking floorboard, and they'd piss on him and throw their fucking beer bottles on him and everything, because he was just the office boy. So then he ended up, after he got hooked up with Roy Welch, became the promoter. He owned the whole thing. And he was, to the end, he was one to fuck those guys back for fucking him around. But it was a time capsule territory, because you actually got to see the methods of promotion, the verbiage, the angles, the finishes that were done in the 40s and 50s. In the formative days of territory wrestling, things were still being done that way because it was still the same people in charge, and it was still drawn. It was different wrestlers. They didn't do like the Sheik did and just you keep the same crew, but it was the same promotional tactics, the same kind of stipulations, the same verbiage. They continued it and Jerry Jarrett had learned from Roy Welch, so he continued that in a lot of cases, even more updated though, but in his company, and it was fascinating. It was at the essence of how you get people involved in personal issues. And that was one of the differences in styles in the territories, where the WWF in the Northeast was the big monster heel challenging the ethnic babyface. In the Carolinas, they had made it where it was the working territory, especially in the 70s with the expansion, where all the best in-ring workers and the most professional-looking athletes. And then there was the craziness in the Midwest with the Bruiser and Sheik and the Crusher and brawls and blood. And in Tennessee, it was personal issues, even between guys that didn't even look like wrestlers, but you could believe that they were. Ron Wright didn't look like a fucking wrestler. People were trying to shoot him. They stabbed him. They burned his planes. Because the Tennessee, the Southern promoters made you believe in the people instead of the business, and got shit tons of heat on the heel so that the hero could be a real hero when he vanquished him. So they're all fighting and hitting each other with chairs and shit, not like today where they cooperate. I had a line here on the show recently people liked. I said, they had a fight where the furniture got in the way. They didn't help each other set the furniture up so they could fall through it. But there was blood and heat and personal issues, and that really never changes. So the same things, the same style of things worked in the 70s as worked in the 40s, and it was fascinating to see. That's where wrestling was always different. Wrestling always had different styles all over the country and different methods of promotion. But the one thing that was constant is they didn't fucking let you know they were pulling your leg, yanking your chain. It was real, just whatever they had decided the flavor of real was in that part of the country.
Well, Jim, let's get one final question here this week on the show. This is an off-topic question.
All righty.
Sent by the original superstar of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru, before Rocky the Ramone, before Charlie from Starkville. This question was sent by John Fell in Baltimore.
Going back to the OG John Fell.
The man,
Jumpin' Johnny Fell.
The man who started it all, John Fell in Baltimore. He would like you to do a little word association with various names that he put here. Again, off topic. Are you prepared? Are you ready?
Okay. I have no knowledge of this ahead of time.
Rod Serling.
There is a fifth dimension beyond that which is known to man, a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity, a middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition. It lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge, a dimension, in short, that we call the Twilight Zone. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. I loved Rod Serling from the time that I was a wee little fellow, wee Willie Winky. In watching the Twilight Zone, and then Night Gallery wasn't his fault. It was a shitty show, but I loved it just for the introductions.
Alfred Hitchcock.
Good evening. I loved Hitchcock. See, the thing about Alfred Hitchcock was he was a bigger star, mainstream name than Rod Serling. But also remember, while Hitchcock was a great director, he never actually wrote most of that stuff, nor really any of the TV episodes. So Hitchcock was a great personality, had that spooky face, was a great director, but Serling was the writer of the two.
W.C. Fields.
I love Fields. Wait, John Fell has snuck into my house and looked at my shelves down in the TV room. Fields is my favorite classic comedian. He was consistently funny, but in an antisocial way that was totally different than everything else that was going on in the world at the time with comedians. I love the fucking one-liners, and you know, you could apply a lot of his shit to any situation, but I always loved the material and the delivery. But did you realize that the W.C. Fields that we know today was actually his second career? Actually, not even second, maybe third or fourth. In the 1900s, as in between 1900 and 1910, W.C. Fields was the biggest star on Broadway. He was not only the biggest star on Broadway, he was one of the biggest names and one of the biggest attractions in vaudeville, and he was known as the world's greatest juggler. And the reason why that some of his juggling still exists on film, because most of it was not captured, is because when he got in the movies, he did the silence and they flopped because he was trying to do a gimmick and he couldn't be verbal. But then later on, by the time he got into sound films, he was so old and his drinking had impaired his motor skills to the point where he could only do flashes of the juggling that he did. But everybody says that if there was film of him in his prime available to see, that he was the greatest juggler in the history of entertainment. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Well, there you go.
Bela Lugosi.
I love Bela Lugosi is the classic Dracula. And I'm sorry, I know there's Christopher Lee fans, but he wasn't Hungarian. He had an English accent, for heaven's sake. We want the Count. And poor Bela, if he could have only lived past his drug problems and etc., and he died in the 50s before the resurrection of the Universal horror films really came about, but he would have made a fortune in fucking residuals and appearances.
Adam West.
TV's Batman. The only man that should be playing Batman on television and the only man that should be mayor of Quahog.
I was surprised. I thought you would go with left and right turn indicators there, but nope, I guess not.
Well, I will flesh it out. He was, as we all know, a very polite and respectful and law-abiding man who used his left and right turn indicators with regularity in his automobile.
Robbie the Robot.
I loved Robot. I grew up with the robot on Lost in Space. But then once that I, obviously started being able to see all the different science fiction movies and everything, Robbie the Robot was second place in my heart. And then, of course, when they actually got to meet in that one infamous episode on Lost in Space, when the Robbie the Robot was actually a robot left over from another civilization on the planet. Well, that was just swell. But Forbidden Planet is an underestimated movie.
Plan 9 from Outer Space.
The first time I got to see Tor Johnson, the super Swedish angel, even though I didn't know he was a wrestler when I first saw this movie, you could tell he was a wrestler. And of course, how can you dislike a movie not only directed by Ed Wood, but featuring cardboard tombstones? I bet you that'll be the next cinematic masterpiece on AEW. Plan 9 from the football field.
From Jacksonville.
Plan 9 from Jacksonville. That would mean they had 8 plans before that, and I don't believe they got that many plans.
Underdog.
Here I come to save the day. Wait a minute, can I do it? Doom 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 da. When criminals in this world appear and break the laws that they should fear and frighten those who see and hear, the cry goes out from far and near for underdog, 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 underdog. Speed of lightning, roar of thunder, fighting all who rob or plunder. Underdog. Oh, underdog. Second verse.
No.
When in the news, the headlines read of those whose hearts are filled with greed and those. All right, okay.
Superman.
Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, but the suckiest, shittiest TV show that was ever put on television. Have you been watching out on Heroes and Icons on Sunday? 11 a.m. Eastern to 12 noon is two episodes of Superman. I loved it when I was a kid and got to see it when I'd go to Aunt Lola's. Channel 19, the independent station in Cincinnati, would air The Adventures of Superman, and it was so thrilling to see Superman on television until now. I realized they bungled that whole program. It was gangsters and goofy one-off criminals and malcontents, no super villains, nothing from the comics, no Lex Luger. Crummy program. But I love Superman.
The Invaders.
Jesus Christ, you know what? John has the privilege of having gone through all the programs and making notes to get to my individual likes. Yes, The Invaders. We've talked about this on the program also. A fine 1960s sci-fi program featuring Roy Thinnis as the only person who knew that the invaders were already here. The opening with the voiceover by William Conrad scared the shit out of me. It was an Aaron Spelling production. But no, it wasn't Aaron Spelling. It was oh shit. Oh goddamn, you're gonna have to edit this out because now I look like a complete imbecile. Quinn Martin is what I was trying to say. Quinn Martin production.
Aaron Spelling.
Rather than Aaron Spelling. Quinn Martin production. He did a lot of detective shows, branched out into science fiction. It was very well done because it was realistic. And for a couple of years when I was a kid, every time we'd go out in public, my mom would take me to the grocery or whatever, I'd look to see if anybody had a left little pinky finger that was sticking out at an odd angle that wouldn't bend because I was afraid they were the invaders.
Marvel Comics.
The NWA to DC's WWF.
The Fantastic Four.
Well, the top team, that's when I knew that comics had passed me by. When Spider-Man and the Avengers exceeded the Fantastic Four in popularity. And do you think now for the modern audience that Fantastic Four aren't the main event, the Stone Cold, the Rock, the Hulk, because of the shitty movies and the way they've been left in the dust by all the better movies?
Well, that's what it is.
The Fantastic Four were the group. They started it all. They were the main event.
The movies that they've made for the Fantastic Four have been awful, but now they are part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So the hope is that they'll be rebooted correctly because Marvel has just done nothing but hit home runs with everything they've done and incorporated in the universe. And now you get to see them interact with Doctor Strange and Spider-Man and everyone else.
Well, we'll see.
You've never watched any of those movies, have you?
Huh?
You've never watched any of those movies, have you?
What, any of the, that's a blanket statement.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe movies.
Oh, yes, I like Iron Man. I've watched a couple of Avengers. It's just they keep changing the fucking backstories. And then to me, that makes it phony. When it's accepted that it's gamma radiation, whatever the case, don't go changing. Don't go changing, try and please me. I love you just the way you are.
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali, the most famous native of Louisville until I came along, obviously. God, I got so much heat with it in the locker room and with David Crockett. I think at one point, remember I told you David used to get on me about sometimes things I'd say. So Crockett in '88 is running a show in Louisville. I'm excited about coming back. It's going to be downtown at the convention center instead of the Gardens. But we were doing the syndicated TV and David and Tony were doing the show and I was standing over them where they were, doing the commentary while the Midnight's having the match. And I said, and I want you to know the people of Louisville, the mayor's already contacted me. They're having a big dinner, a big welcoming home celebration for me when I come home. They ran everything by. They even ran the menu by me. They asked, do you want broccoli? I said, no, we got Muhammad Ali. We don't need another vegetable. Ooh. Ooh. Anyway, I love the greatest.
What did David Crockett say to you?
He said, you shouldn't say things like that. Well, just, try to get some heat, David.
Do people from Louisville feel a sense of pride about Hunter S. Thompson?
Not as much as Ali.
Well, not as much as Ali.
You'll find some people probably down on Bardstown Road in the Highlands that are just Hunter S. Thompson disciples. But I haven't seen his picture on the side of a fucking 10-story building here in town lately, so I think Ali's still ahead.
Stewie Griffin.
Stewie Griffin! Wait, hold on.
I come bearing a gift. I'll give you a hint. It's in my diaper, and it's not a toaster.
It's a Mars bar.
And finally, Penelope Pitstop.
I just feel so bad for Bluto. Because I know that, he's from Bulgari, right? Because he's Bulgarian. So he's from the country of Bulgari.
Bulgaria.
Well, whatever. They don't have all the things we got here in America, like cartoons and things like that, and he didn't know who Penelope Pitstop was, and I feel so bad for him. But can't you see that? Can't you see him and little Pip in their car on Saturday morning on Wacky Races when you get up? Can't you see Dick Dastardly and Muttley leaving them in the dust because they're two dull-witted idiots that can't figure out how to work their car? And then here comes Penelope Pitstop, and she's smiling as she buzzes past them as well. Because sooner or later, everybody is going to blow past Bluto and Pip Sabian. I love Penelope Pitstop. Even the real-life one, she's so virginal and chaste, sweet.
And with that,
Joey,
the drive-thru is closed. All right. I should have ended at 2 notes earlier. Well, with that, the drive-thru has closed, as I just said, but I got discombobulated. I'll say it again. Of course, the Jim Cornette Experience debuts Saturday, wherever you find your favorite podcast, and next week, back on Tuesday. Want to make note that next week's drive-thru, as of now, will be our WrestleMania review. So get ready for that. It's always a very popular episode each and every year. Jim Cornette reviews WrestleMania next week on the drive-thru.
I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to it.
You can get access to classic episodes of the drive-thru and the experience by becoming a patron. Patreon.com/Cornette. For only $5 a month to get access to the archive of the drive-thru and the experience from the beginning in 2013. Right now, we are in the fall of 2016. New episodes added each and every week, or classic episodes added each and every week. Patreon.com/Cornette. Of course, the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, 205,000 subscribers and growing on our march to 1 million. Become one of the subscribers today. Just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette for full episodes, clips of episodes, and omnibus collections, all with the very, very popular Travis Heckel artwork, the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com.
Stop it. Close till further notice while we dig our way out.
At JimCornette.com. The drive-thru is brought to you by the Law Office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until Saturday on The Experience and Tuesday right back here on the drive-thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the great Brian Last. Tally-ho!